was a brand new model called the Boeing 737 MAX 8.
They didn't understand the danger that they were walking into.
Pull up. Pull up.
The plane had flown into the sea, at full speed.
The passengers would, of course, been hysterical. Computers, laptops, phones would have been flying around.
You can tell how violent that impact was.
People shouldn't innocently buy an airplane ticket and then be in a flying coffin.
Boeing had installed a flight control system on the 737 MAX that had the power to take control of the plane from the pilots without them even knowing about it.
They're turning the pages to find out what the hell it is.
Was given the power to try to kill them, essentially, until it finally succeeded.
Will passengers be willing to fly again on its troubled MAX plane?
346 people died. Can you answer a few questions here about that?
On a sunny March morning in Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, a truly remarkable group of passengers converged on Bola International Airport. 149 passengers from 35 different countries around the world got ready to board Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, heading off to Nairobi.
It was seemingly just packed with people who are on goodwill missions of various kinds. There was a big environmental conference happening in Nairobi, a UN environmental conference.
Amongst the 149 passengers were also 9 Ethiopians, and one of them was Tamru Mulu, who is a child protection advocate.
He was a kind of person who's really passionate about life, especially children who are suffering from conflict, drought.
Also on that Ethiopian Airlines flight were 8 Americans, including 24-year-old Samia Stumo, who was raised on a Massachusetts farm by a family with a very strong tradition of activism. Samia had just started work for ThinkWell, which is a global healthcare organization.
This was her first assignment. She was going to East Africa. She, at 24, had impressed them that they sent her instead of someone, a dozen years her senior.
But not everyone on that flight was on a goodwill mission. There were also 2 brothers from California, Melvin and Bennett Riffle, on one last adventure together because Melvin was about to become a new father.
Tell me how big this was for these 2 brothers to do this together. That was pretty remarkable.
I thought so. I mean,
No, I think so too.
Yeah.
I think it's rare that 2 brothers their age would stay close enough to want to travel with each other like that.
Also on Ethiopian Air 302 that morning, a young Russian couple on vacation, Alexander Polyakov and his wife, Ekaterina.
Они очень любили путешествовать. У них мечта была сразу, но они перво-наперво, как они хотели именно поехать в этот национальный парк в Кению, чтобы увидеть крупных кошек.
And as they got ready to board, Ekaterina posted this cell phone video on Instagram of their plane outside that was waiting for them.
And, in general, very few people think much about the model of the plane that they're on. It's something that most people really don't think twice about.
In fact, it was a brand new model welcomed into the Ethiopian Airlines fleet with a lot of ceremony just months earlier, called the Boeing 737 MAX 8.
We are welcoming the state-of-the-art modern airplane, the 737 MAX 8.
It was a groundbreaking move for Ethiopian Airlines to acquire this aircraft. fact that it was new, the fact that it uses the latest technology.
Boeing had had a track record of success, and all expectations at the time were that the MAX would just be, the next big thing for the company.
But it turns out this brand new plane had a secret, unknown even to the pilots. And when it was revealed, it would not just impact Boeing in shocking and unforeseen ways, but the entire air traveling community worldwide.
Boeing is an iconic American company. They're known as the king of the sky. This is a company that's at the heart of American engineering and American manufacturing.
For Captain Sully, celebrated for successfully landing his crippled plane on New York's Hudson River, Boeing has long been the gold standard for passenger aircraft.
Boeing had a century-long history of engineering excellence, an effective culture, good leadership.
There's a saying, and it stands today: if it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. It's affirmation that Boeing has had our back for decades.
This is the 707, Boeing's prototype jet airliner, capable of speeds and altitudes which will revolutionize commercial air travel.
The 707 launches in 1958, and right off the bat, it is a huge success for Boeing. And it just so happens to be the same year that Frank Sinatra releases Come Fly With Me.
Come fly with me.
It speaks to generations of people for whom getting on an airplane was something very special. And it was exotic, and it was desirable, and it was glamorous.
Air travel became sort of the vogue.
People would dress up to travel. Meals and flights were not a joke, something that people might look forward to.
The 1960s were an extraordinary period for the company because of the 7 series of planes.
707 was the first successful jet. After that, Boeing just started building more and more, and the 727 came, the 737 came.
And then they would do the 747. The so-called Queen of the Skies, the first jumbo jet. Boeing, from that point forward, was the premier maker of passenger aircraft.
By the 1980s, Boeing is unmatched in terms of its power, its reach, and those 700s planes are it.
The company was so important to our country's economy, in part because it was the largest exporter in the world.
I mean, they manufacture Air Force One. I don't think you can get kind of any bigger than that.
But by the 1990s, Boeing started to face truly stiff competition from this European consortium called Airbus. But up until that point, Boeing hadn't really taken them all that seriously. But suddenly, they're up and coming.
They've really accelerated to become the only other, at this point, major global competitor to Boeing for commercial aircraft.
In late 2010, Airbus comes out with this new model that really shakes up the industry and puts serious pressure on Boeing to innovate.
The A320neo, a single-aisle aircraft that had new, more fuel-efficient engines that could fly farther and for cheaper.
People want to fly direct, and to do that, you need smaller, more efficient planes.
Boeing was focused on the wide-body world. Airbus beat them to the chase.
The A320neo. Damned if they didn't wind up becoming their fastest-selling airliner. And then Boeing's like, well, wait, what are we going to do?
Boeing comes up with what they think is this really smart plan. Instead of developing an entirely new plane to catch up with Airbus, they decide to take a shortcut and revamp a model that's already on the market, saving them a lot of extra time and money.
That's when they said, okay, we can take another look at the next iteration of 737.
There were new engines, larger, more fuel-efficient engines being added to this aircraft.
Boeing calls this new model the 737 MAX, and they promise they're going to fly more people, it'll cost less money, use less fuel, and cost a lot less to operate.
United Airlines says it has cut a new deal with Boeing to build 150 737s for its fleet over the next 10 years, giving the aircraft manufacturer a leg up against its main competitor, Airbus.
The Boeing 737 MAX was the fastest-selling airliner in Boeing history. Another ball out of the park for Boeing commercial aircraft.
You've got United and American and Southwest all lining up to buy it, along with 70 other buyers around the world.
One of the big customers early on was a young budget carrier in Indonesia called Lion Air. It was a huge deal.
Tonight's Money Matters, Boeing has finalized its biggest sale ever, a $22 billion order from Lion Air of Indonesia.
The 737 MAX 8 had been flying for 17 months without any incident, but then in October of 2018, suddenly, out of the blue, an alarming problem developed with one of Lion Air's brand new MAX planes.
They don't realize that there's something in it that could potentially be hazardous and something that pilots and co-pilots are not familiar with.
All of us are screaming like we are in a roller coaster. To be honest, I think this is my last flight and this is my last day.
Jakarta is the capital, the largest city in Indonesia, and it's a bustling metropolitan with around 10 million residents. The aviation industry was booming, especially with the increase of the middle class in Indonesia.
One of the airlines that benefited from that boom in air travel is Lion Air, an aggressive, rapidly growing budget Indonesian air carrier. In 2011, Lion Air made a huge splash buying more than 200 of Boeing's 737 MAX 8 planes.
Even the signing was overseen by then U.S. President Barack Obama.
So I want to congratulate Lion Air for their incredible success.
One of the Lion Air pilots chosen to fly the new 737 MAX was 31-year-old Bhavya Saneja. He's an Indian national whose dreams of being a pilot started when he was just a child.
So can you tell me about your son?
Yes, Bob, my son was a gifted child, a blessed child. I was into aviation, and for an aviator, when the child is flying and he becomes a commander, it is a big thing, you know, it is the sort of pinnacle of your dreams.
Even though her son had over 6,000 hours of flight experience, Sangeeta says she was really concerned after learning that he wouldn't be going through pilot simulator training for the MAX.
I said, you haven't had a simulator training, how can you go for MAX? And it is a more powerful engine. So without a simulator, how will you manage?
One of the core selling points for Boeing of the 737 MAX was you don't need pilot training in the simulator.
They were selling this to airlines as essentially just another 737 that the airline pilots could fly without learning all that much new.
It's a huge deal to not have to have simulator training for pilots for any airline. It costs money and time. It takes the pilot off of the line and flying passengers around.
Lion Air had asked Boeing about simulator training for their pilots, and Boeing dissuaded them from this.
Now, according to internal Boeing documents, one of their employees ridiculed the request in a message to a colleague saying, now, Lion Air might need a sim to fly the MAX, and maybe because of their own stupidity, I'm scrambling, trying to figure out how to unscrew this now. Idiots.
Well, they were mocking them because if Lion Air required simulator training, then other airlines would say, well, wait a minute. If they're requiring it, maybe we need it. Then the whole house of cards would start to fall apart.
He said, Mom, I've been given ground training. They have given me a training on iPad. I said, what, an iPad?
So he would sit down with an iPad course, and I think there were 3 or 4 parts, and it went through a robotic voice describing what the MAX is about.
The 737 MAX has a 69-inch fan.
Did you see anything in it that looks, wow, that's substantial, we should probably do more training?
It seemed to be enough.
He trusted Boeing blindly, and that trust, you know, gave him immense confidence. He was empowered.
In October of 2018, Lion Air had a handful of the new 737 MAXs in its fleet, and one of the aircraft was going to be departing from Bali with the crew and passengers.
Me and my colleague in office, we went to Bali about October 2018. Bali is amazing for holiday, especially in Asia.
Lion Air flight JT043 was scheduled to take off from Bali to Jakarta.
The flight was quite full of passengers, and most of them are local or domestic tourists like me. It's around 7 or 10 minutes after the takeoff, the flight suddenly feels like a fall down.
It was a dive, a steep drop, 200 feet, and it wasn't something that was just caused by turbulence.
All of us are screaming like we are in a roller coaster.
How many times did it go up and down?
Up and down 4 times.
4 times?
Yes, the flight attendant who was sitting in the back, they could feel it up and down in extreme way.
When an aircraft is pitching aggressively downward, like this aircraft was, and it may feel as if your stomach is coming up into your throat, basically, but then comes the positive G's. It'll squash you down into your seat.
To be honest, I think it's almost like this is my last flight and this is my last day.
It just so happened there was a third pilot traveling on the plane, and he steps in and helps them get control of the situation.
Until it's landed to the airport, I can hear everyone like say, so relief. Some of the passengers are Muslim. I can hear that say, Alhamdulillah, thanks God. I cannot say it in a word. It's really relief. Yeah, I still feel a little bit shaky until now about that.
The pilots were able to control it. They knew they had a problem, but they didn't understand exactly what the nature of the problem was.
After the flight successfully landed in Jakarta, the pilots logged that they had had some issues, but they left a lot of gaps in understanding what had happened on that flight.
That left the next crew in the dark about potential problems with the aircraft.
The very next day, Captain Suneja is assigned to an early morning flight out of Jakarta on that same 737 MAX, but he was given an incomplete report about what happened to that plane the previous night.
These are 2 different flights, but the same exact plane. So it's something that spells disaster.
On the early morning of October 29, 2018, at the airport in Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, Lion Air Flight 610 was getting ready to take off. Its destination was the city of Pangkal Pinang, which is located on the Indonesian island of Bangka.
There was 189 people on board, 181 passengers, 2 pilots, and 6 crew members.
One of the passengers was Miss Fiona Ayuzan. She was a businesswoman, 29 years old. She was flying back to Bangka for work.
Bawain kopi ya Pak, gitu. Karena saya suka kopi Bangka.
Pas pulang ke rumah, Mama bilang sekolah yang benar, terus dikasih uang jajan. Terus kalau besok paginya udah nggak ngeliat, soalnya udah berangkat duluan mamanya.
There was also another passenger by the name of Fendi Cristanto. He was flying to Bangka on a business trip and also on a personal trip. His father just passed away.
Karena dia mau mengikuti sembayang bersama dengan keluarganya untuk sembayang orang tuanya. Pulang mau ngikutin sembayang yang ke-21 hari.
One of the passengers shot some video as they were boarding the flight, No one on board, including the pilots, had any idea that this very same plane suffered a near catastrophe in the air just the previous day. And on that video, you can see the brand new 737 MAX out the window.
Lion Air Flight 610 on that same 737 MAX is taking off from Jakarta. Very shortly after the flight takes off, the pilots are struggling with the plane.
The stick shaker pops off. It is loud and it is rattling in the captain's hands. There are a cacophony, a tidal wave of other distracting alerts. Airspeed disagree, altitude disagreed.
Pull up, pull up. Just 10 minutes later, around 6:30 in the morning, a tugboat captain was out on the Java Sea, just east of Jakarta.
Saya merasakan ada sesuatu benda yang jatuh. Nah, di situ dalam hitungan detik terdengar dentuman cukup keras.
Apa itu?
Jadi saya menghubungi Jakarta Radio.
Iya, di siapa?
Itu telah terjadi pesawat jatuh.
The crash site, it is about 25 miles from Jakarta seaport. On my way to the crash sites, really, I pray to God. I had great expectation that everybody still alive. Arriving on scene, when I saw the debris, the small pieces of fuselage, I lost my hope.
Kalau di dalam, kebanyakan itu hampir sama dengan yang ada di permukaan, karena yang ada di dasar laut, di kedalaman itu adalah potongan-potongan tubuh ataupun bagian-bagian pesawat, entah itu serpihan, kursi.
Presiden Direktur Lion Air Edward.
When news of the crash broke, I immediately flew in from Beijing, where I was based at the time. So the sun has just gone down, and you can see all the police officers along this dock. After arriving in Jakarta, our team headed out straight to the docks where the wreckage from the plane was being brought in. Whether it crashed or what happened, we still don't even know. But these crews have been pulling up and carrying out debris piece by piece. By the next day, the family members of the passengers were gathering and anxiously really waiting for word on whether their loved ones had survived the crash. Among the family members that I got the chance to talk to was the wife of that passenger who took that video of himself boarding onto the Lion airplane just minutes before it crashed. Your husband actually was taking video of the others getting on the plane when he got on?
Yeah.
Yes. Can you show that to us? Well, these are a lot of the other passengers that were on the plane?
Yeah.
Is there still some hope that there are survivors?
Yeah, we do believe that God still control, and we still have some hope that they can find him alive.
It was clear pretty quickly that the plane had flown into the sea, at full speed, and came apart with such force that there was no way anyone could have survived.
Berdoa buat cepet ketemu gitu. Berdoa biar tetap selamat, tapi nggak selamat gitu.
Karena benar-benar saya merasa kehilangan.
Hubungan antara Fiona dengan ibunya ini sangat dekat. Nah, begitu mendengar kecelakaan itu benar-benar down sekali. Benar-benar shock, down. Jadi satu hari setelah pesawat jatuh, mendengar kabar ibu yang meninggal.
Fendi left behind a wife and 4 children, the youngest who was 5 years old.
Jujur ya Bu, suami saya itu kalau naik pesawat itu memang sangat khawatir. Dia itu paling takut kalau naik, dengan rasa ketakutan yang dia alami gitu loh.
At the time, very little was understood about what might have happened. Brand new plane, nice enough day, nothing in particular that would point to an immediate cause of this accident.
This is a fairly new plane. The 737 MAX, it had only 800 flight hours.
But it turns out there was a hidden danger on that plane. A flight control system that Boeing did not even tell the pilots about.
There was nothing in the manuals that alerted the pilots to the existence of this new system that was placed on the MAX.
Pull up.
It has one mission, and that's to drive the nose down.
Terrain.
And it will not stop.
Pull up.
Was given the power to try to kill them, essentially, until it finally succeeded.
Pull up.
Devastating plane crash in Indonesia.
Lion Air jet with 189 people on board fell into the sea minutes after takeoff, leaving no survivors.
So far, 24 body bags have been delivered. The jet was a new Boeing 737.
I gotta say, my first thoughts were, boy, it's a brand new airplane. It must have been bad maintenance, or it must have been pilot error.
A lot of Indonesians initially just saw that this was Lion Air's fault.
ABC's David Curley has the story. Good morning, David.
George, the real thing that we need to find are those two black boxes, which will yield a lot of answers to all these questions.
The National Transport Safety Committee found the flight data recorder on the 1st of November. It was just only 3 days after the crash.
As they look at the contents of the flight data recorder, it becomes clear that something had gone terribly wrong. The pilots are struggling with the plane, almost in a tug of war.
When we found the black box, we found that the aircraft was pitching up and then down, down and up and down and up. It's up and down for about 24 times.
Had you ever seen anything quite like this?
I never knew any case of the aircraft can fly up and down like this. I knew that the pilot was fighting with the aircraft.
It would have been a terrifying roller coaster ride. During that time period, the passengers would have, of course, been hysterical. Things would have been flying in the cabin. Computers, laptops, phones would have been flying around. People would have been screaming.
It was a clear weather, so they could see the sea. And I think it will be very scary for everyone in the cabin to see outside, to feel the speed.
Sepuluh menit atau berapa itu? Rasa ketakutannya sangat amat.
Saya yakin saat itu dia sangat takut sekali, Bu, dengan pesawat yang goyang seperti itu. Saya bisa ngerasain juga.
When the cockpit recorder was eventually recovered, it was revealed that pilots were rifling through the pilot manual, trying to apparently figure out what to do.
They're turning the pages to find out what the hell it is, why the aircraft is going down.
They start shouting about which procedure should do. They knew that they were having serious problems, and they just screamed in the name of God.
That point of time, that only pain he must have felt was the sense of failure, that he's not able to save others, except that he was a brave child, you know.
We surprised. It's very strange that the aircraft doing that way. Then we asked Boeing what kind of system that may create this way.
What Boeing revealed to investigators came as a complete surprise. It turns out that Boeing had installed a flight control system on the 737 MAX that had the power to take control of the plane from the pilots without them even knowing about it. The program was called MCAS.
MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, and that this system, under certain circumstances, can trigger in such a way that it will cause the airplane to nose down.
Why did Boeing put this MCAS system? What was it for? It's a mystery not only for us, but also for the pilot and co-pilot on board the plane.
So the reason they put MCAS on the airplane was because they put these brand new huge engines on an old airframe.
In order to have sufficient ground clearance, they moved the engine further up above the leading edge of the wing and further forward, and that changed the way the airplane flew.
And this effect of the engines came in and the airplane starts to want to pitch up all by itself. The idea was to provide something that would offset that pitching moment or causing the nose to come up.
When the plane computers think the plane is in danger of a stall, so in very basic terms, MCAS pushes the plane's nose down by automatically triggering the rear horizontal stabilizer.
So the MCAS is there to correct what MCAS thinks is wrong.
Right.
The pilots have no idea why this plane is going down against their will,
Yes.
so they tried to fight it back.
Yes. One of the most fundamental muscle memory things about knows how to do. If the nose goes down too far, you pull it back and you trim. And this battle goes back and forth a couple of dozen times.
So it was MCAS, it was the computer against the pilot.
Yes, and the way MCAS was designed, it was given the control authority to do it as many times as necessary. In other words, it was given the power to try to kill them, essentially, until it finally succeeded.
Boeing's revelations about the MCAS system and what caused it to activate on the Lion Air flight in the first place would cause an uproar in the pilot community, and it would all lead to a secretly taped meeting where Boeing was recorded telling pilots that MCAS was being fixed.
Those are going to be relatively straightforward software changes that we expect to be done in a fairly short period of time. We want to make sure we're fixing the right things.
But while that was happening, the plane would continue to fly.
They were rolling the dice with the lives of the global traveling public.
Now that urgent safety warning from Boeing about their brand new 737 jets after that deadly crash in Indonesia. Now concerns about a feature that could malfunction, causing planes to abruptly dive.
A week after the Lion Air crash, Boeing issued a safety bulletin to the airlines, finally revealing the existence of a flight control system on the 737 MAX that could unexpectedly force the plane's nose down.
It's an admission by the company that there is a potential glitch in its newest aircraft.
Just a few days later, Boeing tells operators for the first time that there's a new and previously undisclosed system on the aircraft, and that is MCAS.
That was a shock. It's not in our manuals at all, except in one section, our abbreviation section. We didn't know what MCAS meant. It meant nothing to us.
But there was another critical question to be answered. What caused MCAS to force the nose of the Lion airplane down in the first place? The plane was flying normally, so why did MCAS activate?
Among a lot of surprises was that MCAS was triggered by a faulty angle of attack indicator, which is a relatively innocuous piece of equipment on the side of the airplane.
The angle of attack sensor was feeding incorrect data about the angle of the plane's nose.
It was telling the plane that it was, approaching a stall situation, that its nose was pitched up.
So the plane thought that the nose was angled too high, when in fact it wasn't.
And that MCAS needed to come in and push the nose back down.
And there was a further revelation about MCAS that took investigators by complete surprise. Even though there are two angle of attack sensors on the 737 MAX, MCAS only relied on one of them.
It's a lack of redundancy that appears to my mind to be unacceptable in airplane design, because the AOA indicator is susceptible to damage. It's not a robust piece of equipment.
A single point of failure hooked to a safety critical system, you just don't do that. It's crazy.
The bottom line here is the 737 MAX is safe, and the safety is a core value for us at Boeing.
Boeing CEO Dennis Muhlenberg went on Fox Business to reassure the public that a bulletin had been sent to all the airlines instructing pilots exactly what to do if there was another emergency situation involving the 737 MAX.
We've already issued a couple of additional bulletins that point them back to existing flight procedures to handle that kind of condition.
So Boeing is telling the pilots that one of their options is to simply turn off the power supply to the electric motor on the stabilizer. That's the, the piece that pivots up and down and controls the nose of the aircraft.
Boeing pointed out that the pilots on that previous Lion Air flight who overcame a mid-air emergency involving MCAS had followed the appropriate procedure by turning off power to the stabilizer. That was a step the pilots on the fatal flight did not take.
And that was perceived to be an indirect way of blaming the airline and blaming the pilots without also acknowledging design shortcomings of the system.
It emotionally tore me apart, as if I was blamed for him being the pilot. I was blamed for killing all the people, mothering a son who could not take care of his passengers.
Pilots were furious. Pilot unions asked Boeing, why didn't you tell us if you put something on the airplane that's going to actually interfere with my job?
Late November, about a month after the accident, 4 Boeing executives traveled to the headquarters of the Allied Pilots Association, the union that represents pilots at American Airlines.
That meeting was secretly recorded by the head of the pilots union.
Our president at the time wanted to make sure we knew exactly what was said.
We flat out deserve to know what is on our airplanes.
I don't disagree.
I don't know that understanding this system would have changed the outcome of this. We try not to overload the crews with information that's unnecessary so they actually know the information that we believe is important.
It enraged us. Boeing always gives you the information. They don't parcel it out.
We're working with the FAA right now to try to figure out what software changes we might make to eliminate the failure conditions that we experienced at Lion Air.
They said, well, we're going to correct the software, all the things that you brought up.
Those are going to be relatively straightforward software changes that we expect we can get out in a fairly short period of time. Weeks, not a year, but a couple, maybe 6 weeks-ish.
The question I have for you is, do you feel comfortable that the situation is under control today before any software fixes are implemented?
Absolutely.
They were taking a gamble with keeping that in the air. They had such a big bet on the 737 MAX. They had staked their reputation, they had staked their financial future on it.
4 months after that Lion Air crash, the 737 MAX is still flying all over the world. Meanwhile, 149 people are saying their goodbyes as they prepare to board that Ethiopian Airlines flight to Kenya. Among them, young Samia Stumo, who had just flown in from D.C. and was transiting to Nairobi for her assignment with her global health care organization.
I guess she had landed in Ethiopia, and I said, safe travels, with a bunch of exclamation points, and she said, thanks, boo.
We didn't know that there was an issue with the plane. We thought that the problem that happened in Indonesia was because of a problem with that airlines or the pilots or maintenance or something.
Because the Lion Air crash happened in the other side of the world, maybe they didn't understand the danger that they were walking into.
Samia, where are you? Where are you, Samia?
Boeing killed my daughter. We're not afraid of anybody.
The bottom line here is the 737 MAX is safe.
Pull up. We flat out deserve to know what is on our airplanes.
The nose is pointing down, and it's over.
Boeing 737 MAX 8 crashing to Earth just 6 minutes after takeoff.
There was not a plane there. There was a hole in the ground.
The pilots have no idea why this plane is going down against their will.
Pilots were furious. Why didn't you tell us if you put something on the airplane that's going to actually interfere with my job?
What really shocks me is their greed. How they have the audacity to do what they're doing.
You're not the person anymore to solve the situation.
And they really should go to jail.
Named Samya.
She was a force of nature. She was just, oh gosh, she was, you know, beautiful, intelligent, charismatic. She could just light up a room. But around here, you know, she raised pigs. She would sell the meat to the neighbors. If she decided you needed to buy her pork, you were going to buy her pork.
Samya very much absorbed the family ethic, that you are supposed to use your time well, you develop your skills. She became very good at her instrument, which for her was cello. Watching Samya, you got the sense of someone who had really kind of brought together all these strains in the family, starting with Uncle Ralph in his activism, and then through her own parents.
Definitely he influenced Samya tremendously because she was out there at 9 years old campaigning for his presidential campaign. They made her cry. You know, your mother shouldn't allow you to be out here, and Ralph Nader is spoiling the election, and she understood the issues and she talked right back at them.
She had leadership written all over her. She had compassion in an intellectually rigorous way. Everybody loved her.
One pivotal moment in young Samya's life that fueled her drive to change the world was the tragic childhood death of her brother Nels.
He was diagnosed with cancer at 15, 16 months of age, and he ended up not making it. He died a little over 2 years old. We actually, we only have one picture with all 4 kids.
Did she ever tell you that part of her motivation and dream to get into medicine was because of what happened to Nels?
Yeah. Yeah, she did. She believed that, you know, her calling was healthcare, and I think that was partially a result of her exposure to her brother's illness.
Samya went to the University of Massachusetts and then managed to get a full ride scholarship for the public health master's program at the University of Copenhagen.
Everybody liked her, but she was very firm in her beliefs. It really kind of forced you to think about what you said, think about what you believe, and defend it.
When I met Samya, I was like really shy to talk to people. We just would go on these fun adventures. It just helped me be more fearless.
She had this knack of making you feel as fascinating as she was.
In January of 2019, Samya had landed a dream job in Washington, D.C. with a global public health organization called ThinkWell.
Just a few months into her new job at ThinkWell, Samya gets her first assignment to go overseas. They were going to send her over to East Africa in March of 2019, where she was going to help set up some new offices.
This is the kind of thing that a relatively seasoned person is usually put into, and someone like Samya, without much experience in this, we were just so blown away by her that we felt that she had the acumen to be able to figure this out.
As Samya got ready for her Africa trip, perhaps the last thing on her mind was the tragic crash in Indonesia just a few months earlier of a Boeing 737 MAX plane, killing everyone on board.
And now we're going to turn to that chilling report about the Lion Air crash. From the moment the flight took off, pilots fought a tug-of-war with an automated system that repeatedly pushed the jet's nose down.
After the crash, concerns had been raised about a new flight control system Boeing had installed on the plane called MCAS.
Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. This system, under certain circumstances, can trigger in such a way that it will cause the airplane to nose down, independent of the pilot's judgment.
It turns out there was a defective sensor on that Lion airplane that accidentally triggered MCAS to activate and caused the plane to repeatedly go into a dive before it finally crashed.
After Lion Air, there was not a lot of urgency. I think it was sort of easy to dismiss it as a one-off. I would say it pretty quickly faded from view for the majority of the traveling public.
On March 10th, 2019, Samia left D.C. for Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where she would be transferring to another plane on her way to her assignment in Kenya.
So there's 149 travelers from around the world, and they're about to get on the newest Boeing airliner, the 737 MAX. They have no idea of the danger.
On March 10th, 2019, Samia Stumo had just arrived in the Ethiopian Addis Ababa after a long flight from Washington, D.C.
When I woke up, I just looked at the message and it said 2 more hours to Nairobi.
There were 149 passengers on that flight from 35 countries, most of them heading to Nairobi for a UN conference.
Also, at Gate 12 in Terminal 2, those two brothers from California, Melvin and Bennett Riffle, who were enjoying a globe-trotting jaunt together before the birth of Melvin's daughter.
When we said goodbye, he gave me a kiss and gave me a kiss on the stomach for Emma, you know, and he was all excited but nervous.
There were also this young Russian couple who posted a video on Instagram showing the 737 MAX, a brand new aircraft.
Unlike the pilots involved in that Indonesian crash, the Ethiopian Airlines pilots knew about Boeing's MCAS flight control system, and Boeing had actually sent a directive to airlines instructing pilots what to do if a plane went into a sudden dive on its own.
So Boeing is telling the pilots to turn off the power supply to the electric motor on the stabilizer. That's the, you know, the piece that pivots up and down and controls the nose of the aircraft.
It was a bright Sunday morning. The plane took off at 8:30. And 3 minutes after takeoff, the aircraft started behaving erratically.
Their instruments start to show different readings.
After 6 minutes later, the plane was spotted again, about 30 miles from Addis in a small town called Bishoftu.
Tashkarakaru dubani imboba. Dubani imboba ara dufe durani mata sol qaba mata sol qaba
yero la fawdo gawon sagale gudda dafi hara gudda sami tolkay.
Immediately drive to the Ethiopian Airlines compound. There were family members, people were crying and some of them holding their head, and it was so horrifying to see them.
An hour earlier or something, I talked to him and it just didn't feel right.
I don't know, I was trying to deny that it happened, or it's true, or somehow he has been spared.
We start in Ethiopia, where around 157 people are feared dead after a plane crashed early on Sunday.
Within, I think it was 2.5 hours or 3 hours, we were on a plane headed to Addis Ababa. This dirt road takes you to the field where that crash site is. So finally, after almost 3.5 hours, that we arrive at the crash site, and it's splayed out in the fields. Right next to the debris field, you have the smell of jet fuel intermingled with the smell of death. And you can see those workers picking through everything, trying to ensure that they don't miss any key parts of the plane. The plane came down at such an enormous rate of speed, basically as fast as a cruise missile flies, that it essentially disintegrated into that hole. You can tell how violent that impact was, how shredded these metal components are. But you also have to remember that there is more difficult work here for a lot of these workers here, and that is dealing with the people who are on these planes. And everywhere you go, you see shredded bags and personal effects.
Breaking news, an Ethiopian Airlines flight has crashed.
With victims from 35 different countries on board, grief resonates all around the world, including in a small seaside town in Russia.
Ну, просто очень обидно, когда такие дети на взлете, так сказать, и на взлете своей карьеры, на взлете всего погибают.
In the Northern California town of Redding, a phone rings in the Riffle home.
It was the embassy in Ethiopia. I said, I know why you're calling. They said, both boys. And I said it was.
It's something you can't believe when you hear it. It's like, it's just like you're in a nightmare or something, and it's just totally unbelievable.
It's one thing to lose one of your children, and you lost both.
Yeah. Lost our family, and we had to help Brittany.
I said, please don't tell me my husband's dead. And Susan said, both of them. And I just collapsed. What do I do now? I'm pregnant. What do I do? Our baby. What? What do I do now?
And word of the terrible crash also travels to a family farm nestled in the Berkshires in Massachusetts.
I turned on the BBC. It said that a plane had crashed. I remember I couldn't breathe. Then I woke up, Michael, and he told me, what are you talking about? That's impossible. That's what he told me.
My sister is not going to die in the crash. It doesn't fit into your world. And we thought, oh, well, maybe she survived. We needed to get to Ethiopia right away to help her. We had to be there. And we had to protect her.
We got in a car and we headed for JFK. Got on the flight, and along the way, along our journey, we learned that there were no survivors because we kept looking at the news.
Like Nadia and Michael, many grief-stricken families made their way to the crash site, desperate to find any trace of their loved ones.
You know, there was not a plane there. There was a hole in the ground.
Anybody able to find the body remains?
There was nothing bigger than a femur bone.
The black box data now in the hands of Ethiopian officials.
As the investigation continued in the cause of the crash, there was a question on many people's minds. Would Boeing 737 MAX plane be implicated in a fatal tragedy again?
The Boeing 737 MAX 8 crashing to Earth just 6 minutes after takeoff in Ethiopia.
First Indonesia, now Ethiopia.
The big question here is, has the same thing happened?
The flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder were recovered the next day, and it didn't take long for investigators to conclude that there were similarities.
The faulty angle of attack sensor triggered the activation of MCAS right after takeoff, and that is almost exactly what happened on the Lion Air aircraft.
what was heard on the cockpit voice recorder, the first officer saying, pitch up, pitch up, pitch up, while the MCAS was kicking and nosediving the aircraft. It was so difficult for them to keep the aircraft under control.
Despite similarities between the two crashes, this time there was a huge difference. Not only the Ethiopian Airlines pilots knew about MCAS, they also followed Boeing's instruction on how to disable it.
The crew performed all the procedures repeatedly provided by the manufacturer, but was not able to control the aircraft.
This was actually pretty shocking because Boeing had been suggesting that overcoming an erroneous MCAS activation was pretty straightforward. If that was the case, why did this second accident happen?
To better understand why those pilots could not recover control of the plane, we asked two experienced American Airlines pilots and members of the Allied Pilots Association to take us through what might have occurred in that Ethiopian Airlines cockpit based on information from the black boxes. So in here, what will we see?
In this airplane, while it is not a MAX, the displays are very similar, but what's unique about the MAX in this case is the MCAS.
I'll be kind of simulating the MCAS with my electric trim switch to show what the MCAS would be doing.
So now we're going to take off from the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, heading to Kenya.
Yep.
Shortly after the takeoff, faulty data from the plane's angle of attack sensor triggers a myriad of false alerts in that cockpit.
Seconds after you take off.
Altitude disagree, airspeed disagree.
The stick shaker is shaking continuously, very loud. This will not stop throughout the entire flight.
In the middle of all these distractions, MCAS suddenly activates.
MCAS is firing. Starts to push the nose down. I'm pulling back, and then I trim up, get a little bit of trim up on it, and the MCAS kicks in again. The MCAS is more powerful and fast than what the pilot can do, so it'll always win more.
It was at this point that the Ethiopian Airlines pilots followed Boeing's instructions and cut off electronic power to the stabilizer in the plane's tail. So you realize that MCAS is not working.
But the problem now is that the nose is so far down, they're having trouble
holding it back, yeah.
MCAS had left the plane in such a precarious position that the pilots did not have the physical strength to manually pull it out of that deep dive.
Now the stick is getting very, very heavy, so the captain says, pull with me, which is basically saying, help me. I've got a lot of weight on this, but I have no trim to do it. I go, okay, manual trim.
Okay, and I'm trying, but it's not working.
I can't hold it back.
Unable to control the plane manually, in a last-ditch effort, the Ethiopian pilots decided to turn the electronic stabilizer system back on.
The MCAS fires. And this fire goes and goes. I'm pulling back, a little bit of trip. And now the nose is pointing down and it's over. Stop the sim. They're headed toward the ground. They turn those switches back on, which is not in a checklist, but welcome to the battlefield. You're staring at the ground and you don't know what else to do.
Do you ever think about what goes through the mind and the heart of pilots when the plane is going down?
Yes, I don't like to think about that. I think that's everyone's worst nightmare.
It's hard. But they fought. They fought. They did what pilots do. The system let them down. The system let them down.
Unlike with Lion Air, the Ethiopian Air crash has sudden and swift repercussions for Boeing. Ethiopian Air immediately grounds their entire MAX fleet, and like a domino effect, countries around the world start grounding their fleets.
All of us at Boeing are deeply sorry for the loss of life in the Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 and Lion Air Flight 610 accidents.
Boeing was saying that they were working on adding safeguards to MCAS to make a safe airplane even safer.
Would the accident have happened without MCAS, though? You call it a link.
It's a chain of events, right? There is no singular item. It's a chain of events.
But what you came up with in the end was flawed, was it not?
We've designed the MAX to have the flying qualities that were desired in the hands of the pilots. The MCAS system is part of that design effort.
Corporations always see profit, always see brand protection. They will not easily admit their wrongdoing, even where it is very evident. And that was the case with Boeing at that particular time.
346 people died. Can you answer a few questions here about that?
He's sorry that we lost our family members. He doesn't take any accountability for having caused their deaths.
If Boeing thought that Nadia and Michael and the other victims' families were going to just quietly go away and not try to hold the company accountable, they could not have been more wrong.
It was amazing to behold these two people from this farm in western Massachusetts coming down to take on really one of the biggest corporations in the world.
Mr. Stumo, thank you for your presence today.
Boeing killed my daughter. We're not afraid of anybody.
In the fall of 2019, Nadia went back to Ethiopia. After months of digging and searching, workers had actually been able to find some remains from the crash. And Nadia brought back those remains, and they actually included some artifacts.
We got back Samia's business journal, which talks about her plans. We got back her passport. This is a business blouse that she took with her, and it all smells of jet fuel. They fill the room with the smell. I mean, to me, it's a smell of death.
I don't want other mothers and other families to go through this. I don't want them to be trying to hear their daughter's voice and, wonder what you would say to them. So that's why it's important to work on the aviation safety. Because people shouldn't innocently buy an airplane ticket and then be in a flying coffin.
While Nadia and her husband Michael were consumed by grief, they were able to quickly turn their anguish into action against Boeing.
The family of Samia Stumo shares their pain so that others don't feel the same.
Michael and Nadia fly to Chicago and file the first lawsuit against Boeing by an American family.
I want her death not to be in vain. I don't want anybody else to die.
Nadia and Michael, along with more than 100 other families of victims around the world, alleged that Max had a defective design and that Boeing issued inadequate warnings about the plane, something that Boeing denies.
This is going to go down as one of the most callous, deliberate efforts to keep a product in the public domain for the wrong reasons.
What really shocks me is their greed. I don't know how they can still, sleep at night.
But there was a second front in Nadia and Michael's battle against Boeing. They and the other families were determined to take part in the congressional hearings into what went wrong with the 737 MAX and make sure that another crash never happened again.
We have 3 generations of farm advocacy in my family, and Nadia, of course, has, Ralph Nader and her family and that advocacy.
People should not fly this plane if it's ungrounded.
My uncle said to us practical things.
To never settle for staff, always go for the top.
Like it's cruel irony. Samia's family knew how to do it because it's a very complicated system to navigate, and it's a fight.
Nadia has really been, I think, a principal support for many of the other families out there, while Michael is pursuing the more, what's the fix and what went wrong.
As we go forward, this committee will leave no stone unturned.
We kept saying you can't just have the bureaucrats and the engineers and the pilots. It's all about the families.
Today,
I speak not only with my voice, but the voices of my departed family.
Paul Girogi testified.
And he had lost his entire family.
I think about the last 6 minutes a lot. My wife and my mom-in-law knew they were going to die. They had to somehow comfort the children during those final moments, knowing they were all their last. I wish I was there with them.
At the congressional hearings, there was some talk that foreign pilots failed to respond appropriately.
For me, the accident report reaffirms my belief that pilots trained in the United States would have successfully been able to handle this situation.
Chair now recognizes Captain Chelsea B. Sullenberger III.
That claim was called out after the dramatic appearance of perhaps the most famous pilot in America, Chesley Sullenberger.
I'm one of a relatively small group of people who've experienced such a crisis and lived to share what we learned about it.
Sully was the miracle on the Hudson pilot. He successfully landed his plane on New York's Hudson River after a bird strike crippled his engines. Captain Sullenberger became a national hero, immortalized by Tom Hanks in the movie Sully.
Like many pilots, I was disappointed that many were blaming the dead crews of the accident flights. I've got to tell you from personal, first-hand experience how real and how intense the startle factor is.
I recently experienced all these warnings in a 737 MAX flight simulator during recreations of the accident flights. Even knowing what was going to happen, I could see how crews could have run out of time before they could have solved the problems.
Boeing, built into their design of MCAS sort of an assumption that pilots would be able to react to something going wrong within 4 seconds.
Well, think about that. Let's start the clock. Now, 2, 3. That's it. It's just really unlikely almost any airline crew would have acted effectively that fast. These accidents should never have happened. And I'm really distressed that they happened.
But the investigation into Boeing would go much deeper, raising questions about whether Boeing knew about problems with the MAX before they put it in the air.
The information coming out of the investigation is shocking.
And it would all lead to a face-to-face confrontation between a grieving mother from a farm and the head of one of the most powerful companies in the world.
And I want to confront a situation, but I want to say it to you directly because I don't think you understand what we're saying.
Things that are coming out of the investigation are shocking about what Boeing knew and what it was saying internally.
House investigation concluded that the safety of the flying public was put into jeopardy by Boeing's pressure to compete with Airbus.
The committee uncovered emails and communications showing that there had been lower-level employees who raised questions several times about MCAS.
In an internal email, a Boeing engineer wrote about that problem that triggered MCAS in both plane crashes, saying, "Are we vulnerable to single sensor failures with the MCAS implementation?" This is back in 2015, asking about the vulnerability of these particular devices.
Yeah, they're setting my daughter up to die in 2019. These are questions of life and death. But that's not how they treated them in the company.
House investigators released documents they had obtained from inside Boeing showing that their own training pilots had a very dismissive attitude towards regulators and customers.
One Boeing employee who emerged as a central figure in the investigation was Chief Technical Pilot Mark Fortner, who became well known in the media after his emails became public.
Mark Fortner was the one who asked regulators whether they could remove any mention of MCAS from the flight crew operations manual. Fortner, in some of the emails and instant messages, was kind of gloating at his ability to, as he said, Jedi mind trick regulators.
In fact, it was Fortner who wrote that instant message to a colleague, mocking Lion Air for their stupidity in requesting simulator training, referring to them as idiots.
His emails were shocking, but they're just the tip of the iceberg of the failure of the safety culture at Boeing.
Some Boeing employees openly questioned the safety culture of the company during development of the 737 MAX. In one email, a worker said, "This airplane is designed by clowns, who in turn are supervised by monkeys." Another Boeing employee wrote, "Frankly, right now all my internal warning bells are going off, and for the first time in my life, I'm sorry to say that I'm hesitant about putting my family on a Boeing airplane."
The safety culture was eviscerated under production pressure.
Meanwhile, Nadia, Michael, and the other families have another battle to fight. And that's with the Federal Aviation Administration, which certified the 737 MAX as safe and allowed it to fly even after the first crash.
One of the most explosive discoveries came from within the Federal Aviation Administration. And remember, the FAA's sole job is to ensure the safety of the traveling public.
After the Lion Air accident, the FAA had done an analysis, that indicated that if nothing was changed, that there might be, 15 accidents over the course of the next decades while the MAX was in use. And, that would make it, the deadliest commercial airliner, ever.
We stood out there in front of the FAA with our sign.
Her life was just cut short. That was caused by complicity with Boeing.
For the first time, and on tonight's one-year anniversary of the first 737 MAX crash, Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg faced Congress.
For Nadia, Michael, and the other families, the person they really wanted answers from was the man in charge of Boeing.
When Dennis Muilenburg comes to Washington to testify, it's a really big moment.
I've met with the families, but they keep faces of their loved ones in people's minds. They're not going to be forgotten.
I, too, would like to acknowledge the families that are here with us today. And again, wanted to tell you I'm sorry. We are deeply, deeply sorry. And we'll never forget.
He was just saying words for the camera. They never tried to reach the families personally.
Who bears the principal responsibility at Boeing for the cascading events that resulted in the crash of Lion Air Flight 610 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302?
Mr. Chairman, my company and I are responsible. We're responsible for our airplanes. And we know there are things we need to improve. I'd grown up on a farm in Iowa. My parents taught me the value of hard work and integrity.
To do the aw shucks Iowa farm boy thing, I'm an Iowa farm boy. It doesn't cut it with me, and it was grating.
As I probably won't get to ask it another time. Well, you talked about Iowa just like one too many times, and the whole group said, go back to the farm. Go back to Iowa. Do that. You're not the person anymore to solve the situation. But I want to say it to you directly, because I don't think you understand what we're saying.
I respect that. I really do. In the end, it's about safety. And
Even if you're not capable of doing that.
I respect your inputs there. I just tell you, we are very focused on safety, and you have...
I wanted to pierce through to the human being. Imagine being in our shoes.
Just a couple months after the House hearing, Muilenburg was forced out as CEO of Boeing.
But while Muilenburg may be gone, the clouds of suspicion over Boeing remain.
And the Justice Department is investigating, and hopefully some people are going to go to jail.
But after losing billions because of the MAX scandal, Boeing's commercial future may hinge on one question: will passengers be willing to fly again on its troubled MAX?
The Justice Department has launched a criminal investigation into the plane's development.
The government opened a criminal probe. The investigation is focused on whether Boeing withheld information from regulators.
The Justice Department would not talk to us about the criminal investigation, but sources have told 2020 that at this point, agents are looking hard at one former Boeing employee in particular,
Prosecutors at the Department of Justice were focusing on building a case involving Mark Faulkner, the former chief technical pilot for the 737 MAX.
Faulkner's attorney did not respond to our repeated requests for comment, but has stated in the past that as a pilot and Air Force vet, he would never jeopardize the safety of other pilots or their passengers.
He was part of the culture of concealment, but it certainly does not end with him. There's a lot of people much higher up in the food chain in Boeing who were involved in this.
They really should go to jail. I mean, people who are responsible for decisions which kill other human beings should be personally responsible.
But the ongoing criminal investigation is one of just many problems facing Boeing right now. Their reputation is in tatters.
At this point, Boeing is looking feverishly for any success.
Getting the MAX flying is still at the top of their list.
Boeing has made a number of changes to its MAX plane. MCAS will now rely on both sensors. It'll only activate once. Pilots will also be required to complete flight simulator training. And in a statement to 2020, Boeing said it had made a series of meaningful changes to strengthen our company's safety practices and culture.
Cleared for travel. That was the message from the Federal Aviation Administration to Boeing for its 737 MAX.
One of the longest aircraft groundings in history is over.
I am 100% comfortable with my family flying on it.
After a 20-month grounding, just last week, the FAA approved the Boeing 737 MAX to return to the skies.
And on its website, American Airlines advertises the first MAX flight from Miami to New York City on December 29th.
I do think the 737 is a safe airplane. I have no issue about that. But this MCAS thing was bad. I think that trust is going to be really hard to get back at this point.
Neither of us would ever get on the 737 MAX, and we will warn every single person we know to make sure that they don't fly on a 737 MAX.
Mr. Stumo, thank you for your presence today.
Meanwhile, this summer, Michael testified about reforming the FAA certification process, which, under federal rules, allows aircraft manufacturers to largely oversee the testing and development of planes themselves.
The FAA's core vision appears to be to reduce its direct involvement in certification.
It was like the fox guarding the chicken coop. When you have Boeing certifying Boeing, hello, what do you expect out of that?
System is not broken. However, all processes need to be improved, really each and every day.
The FAA did not respond to 2020's request for an interview to discuss the issues surrounding the 737 MAX. After the hearing, Nadia and Michael briefed victims' families from around the world on a Zoom meeting.
Thank you, really, Michael, for what you just said.
We have a role to play. You or anybody has a role to play as a victim.
She's been a great advocate for the families, her and her husband, Michael. No, I can't thank them enough.
I know the sun is in your eyes.
On the other side of the country in Redding, California, Melvin Riffle's daughter was born just 2 months after he was killed in the Ethiopian air crash. Melvin had picked out a name for his then unborn daughter, Emma.
So over here is Melvin's little hope chest.
Oh, wow.
Things that I would like Emma to remember Melvin by. This is actually his passport. This is the only thing that I got off the plane. Look, Emma, who is that? That Daddy? Yeah, it is on.
This is Samia's room. I can't believe that this is remained untouched for more than a year. I look for Samia all the time. I call Samia. Sometimes I'm in the house by myself. I just shout, Samia, Samia, where are you? Where are you, Samia? But Boeing took her, and I wish I could trade places with her. She deserved to live, and the world deserved to have Samia. I know she would want her family to fight that other people not die.
Sammy just wants people that are wronged to be righted.
with her characteristic warmth, offering a comforting hug and letting them know she would be nearby if they needed anything. The following morning, Saturday, May 5th, a sudden silence fell over Paradise Ranch. Nancy failed to show up for a scheduled Bible study, an absence that immediately alarmed her close friends and family, as she was exceptionally reliable. Amanda, sensing that something was deeply wrong, asked a neighbor to go over and check on her mother. What the neighbor discovered was chilling. The door to Nancy's cottage was wide open, the television was blaring, and the interior suggested a sudden, violent interruption of a peaceful evening. When Amanda and law enforcement arrived, they confronted a scene that spoke of immediate danger. Inside the cottage, Nancy's purse, car keys, cellular phone, and iPad case were all left behind on a bench. Her 2 vehicles remained parked outside. More disturbingly, investigators found large blood stains on the floor. Blood spatter on the headboard of her bed and the adjacent cabinet, and a significant amount of blood on a beige pillow. There were no signs of forced entry, indicating that Nancy may have opened the door to someone she recognized, or that the intruder had approached stealthily under the cover of night. Detective Clinton Cole, a senior deputy with the sheriff's office at the time, was dispatched to the scene. Walking into the cottage, he immediately recognized that this was not a simple missing persons case, but a highly suspicious crime scene. The evidence suggested that Nancy had been assaulted inside her bedroom and taken against her will. The investigation began with a sprawling, complex canvass of the property. With more than 20 wedding guests staying in the immediate vicinity, the initial pool of potential suspects was extraordinarily large. Investigators had to consider whether an out-of-town guest had committed a crime of opportunity or if someone closer to home was involved. The urgency of the search intensified when officers with the California Highway Patrol discovered a collection of household items discarded along La Ponza Road, approximately 6 to 7 miles from Nancy's home. The items included a gingham print pillow, bedding, a woman's dress, a pair of shorts, and a shirt. The patterns on the bedding matched the sheets remaining in Nancy's cottage, and Amanda quickly confirmed that the clothing belonged to her mother. The discovery of these blood-stained items along a rural highway suggested a grim reality. Nancy had been wrapped in her own bedding and transported away from the property, either severely injured or deceased. As search and rescue teams, helicopters, and tracking dogs combed the rugged foothills and dry riverbeds surrounding Paradise Ranch, detectives began the painstaking process of interviewing everyone who had access to the property. They turned their attention first to the wedding guests. While most of the guests were cooperative, one individual raised significant concern. He had stayed behind at the ranch during the wedding rehearsal dinner on Friday night, and his initial reluctance to cooperate with investigators made him a primary person of interest. Detectives traveled to his residence in Northern California for a detailed interview, eventually obtaining photo evidence from his wife's phone that placed him at the rehearsal dinner, thereby clearing him of suspicion. He also voluntarily provided a DNA sample which did not match the unidentified male DNA that forensic scientists had successfully extracted from the bloody pillowcase found in Nancy's bedroom. The search for the contributor of that DNA profile led investigators to explore other avenues. Nancy had recently decided to sell Paradise Ranch to devote herself fully to her spiritual ministry, and several contractors had been working on the property to finalize repairs. Among them was Sean Bloom, a general contractor who had recently been terminated by Nancy following a heated, contentious dispute over the quality of his work and outstanding payments. Bloom was interviewed extensively, while he made no secret of his frustration with Nancy. He ultimately cooperated fully and submitted a DNA sample that cleared him of any involvement. Investigators also had to examine the painful possibility of familial conflict. Nancy had an estranged son, Chad, who had grown bitter over religious differences and family dynamics. Their relationship at the time of her disappearance was severely strained. On the night she vanished, Nancy had sent him a text message in an attempt to find common ground. When approached by detectives, Chad was defensive and refused to provide a DNA sample, citing a distrust of law enforcement. Investigators placed him under surveillance, eventually retrieving discarded beer bottles from his truck after he was stopped for a traffic violation. The laboratory analysis of the DNA on those bottles, however, also resulted in an elimination. With conventional investigative leads exhausted, the case threatened to stall. It was at this critical juncture that the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office decided to employ a sophisticated and relatively new digital investigative tool, a Google geofence search warrant, by establishing a virtual boundary around Nancy's secluded cottage and the surrounding acreage of Paradise Ranch. Investigators requested historical location data for any cellular devices that had been active within that specific area during a precise time frame. The timing of the crime had been narrowed down significantly by a crucial discovery in Nancy's phone records. At 12:17 in the morning on Saturday, May 5th, an emergency call had been placed from her phone. The call lasted for 0 seconds, indicating that it had been disconnected almost instantly, likely snatched away or shut off by an assailant. This brief, tragic attempt to summon help provided a precise temporal anchor for the geofence search. When Google returned the results of the geofence warrant, investigators began the meticulous process of filtering out the devices belonging to the wedding guests. Among the data, one device stood out. A cellular phone had pinged inside the walls of Nancy's studio cottage at 1:33 and again at 1:52 in the morning, a time when no authorized person should have been near her dwelling. When investigators requested the subscriber information for that specific device, the name that came back was one they recognized: Carlo Fuentes Flores. Carlo Fuentes Flores was a 36-year-old painter who had been hired to work on the decks and exterior trim of the main house at Paradise Ranch. To those who knew him, he was an unassuming, polite, and hardworking family man who had moved to the area from Mexico. His employer of nearly 20 years described him as professional, courteous, and exceptional with clients. He had no criminal record in either the United States or Mexico, and when initially contacted by phone shortly after Nancy's disappearance, he had been friendly and cooperative, mentioning that Nancy had once kindly given him a tamale to show her appreciation for his hard work. Yet, as criminal psychologists often observe, the public persona of an offender can differ dramatically from their private reality. Detectives began a deep dive into the digital life of the mild-mannered painter. What they uncovered was a dark, highly compartmentalized world. Flores's Google search history revealed a persistent interest in adult content featuring older women, explicitly searching for terms related to mature women in lingerie. Nancy Woodrum was older than Flores by more than 20 years, suggesting a potential psychological motive that aligned with his private fixation. Furthermore, his phone contained numerous self-shot videos of encounters with various women and acquaintances, revealed that he had recently begun drinking heavily and frequenting adult entertainment venues, hiding a secret life from his wife and young daughter. Armed with this compelling circumstantial evidence, investigators knew they needed a definitive physical link before making an arrest. They initiated physical surveillance on Flores, tracking him to a local restaurant where he had lunch with his wife. When he departed, investigators immediately secured the Coca-Cola bottle he had used. Forensic technicians extracted his DNA from the bottle and compared it to the DNA found within the partial bloody handprint on the pillow from Nancy's bed. The result was an exact match. In the interrogation room, Detective Cole and his partner presented a professional, structured line of questioning. They began by establishing Flores's familiarity with the property, showing him aerial photographs and confirming his knowledge of Nancy's cottage. When initially asked if he had any involvement in her disappearance, Flores denied it, maintaining his calm, polite demeanor. However, when the detectives revealed the existence of the DNA evidence, his composure shattered. Visibly trembling, Flores admitted that he had returned to the property on the night of the crime, but he initially attempted to present the tragedy as a tragic accident. He claimed that he had gone back to the ranch to retrieve a ladder for his next job, and while backing up his vehicle in the dark, he had accidentally run Nancy over. He claimed that he had carried her back inside her cottage to help her, where she subsequently collapsed. Detectives immediately challenged this narrative, pointing out that an accidental collision on the driveway would not result in significant blood spatter on her bedroom walls and headboard, nor would it explain the presence of her DNA on a pillow used to suffocate her. Recognizing that his initial fabrication had failed, Flores broke down and confessed to the full extent of his crimes. He admitted that he had entered her home with the intent to assault her, that he had physically overpowered and raped her, and that he had ultimately used the pillow to suffocate her to prevent her from identifying him. In an unexpected moment of apparent remorse, Flores offered to lead investigators to where he had hidden Nancy's remains. He was placed in a police vehicle and directed detectives on an hour-long drive eastward, away from the arable land of Paso Robles and into the arid, rugged terrain of the Carrizo Plain near the border of Kern County. In this remote, vast wilderness, the search was physically demanding and emotionally fraught. Flores initially struggled to remember the exact location, stopping at several similar-looking spots as anxiety grew among the search team. Finally, at a secluded location off the main road, Detective Cole spotted a small, unnatural pile of rocks stacked in a circle. Flores looked at the rocks, fell to his knees, and began to weep. Beneath the stones, investigators discovered Nancy's remains, which had been severely affected by the elements and local wildlife. It was a somber, heartbreaking conclusion to a multi-month search, but it provided the definitive physical evidence needed for prosecution. Before leaving the scene, Flores made a poignant request to the detectives, asking them to tell his young daughter that he was sorry for the mistake he had made, realizing that he would never return home. Back at the station, he wrote a formal letter of apology to Nancy's family and his own. In January of 2022, rather than facing a highly publicized trial, Flores entered a slow plea of guilty to first-degree murder with a special circumstance of committing the murder during the commission of a rape. The judge reviewed the extensive evidence gathered by the sheriff's office and sentenced Flores to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although the resolution brought a profound sense of relief and closure to the Paso Robles community, Nancy's family continues to carry her memory, honoring her beautiful spirit by continuing her love of horses and nature, passing those traditions down to her grandchildren. A similar study of financial desperation, domestic deception, and the ultimate triumph of forensic inquiry unfolded in the mountain community of Camas, Utah. This second narrative centers on the sudden death of Eric Richens, a 39-year-old devoted father, successful businessman, and respected member of the community, whose life was tragically cut short in March of 2022. Eric Richens was a man of deep faith, strong work ethic, and robust vitality. Raised on a family cattle ranch in Summit County, he grew up with a passion for the outdoors, hunting, and physical labor. He built a highly successful stonemasonry business, CNE Masonry, which grew into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Eric was deeply committed to his 3 young sons, coaching their soccer teams and teaching them to appreciate the rugged beauty of the Utah wilderness. He was known for his infectious laughter, his generous spirit, and his dedication to his family. Eric was married to Corey Richens, a woman who possessed a strong, ambitious drive of her own. The couple had met while Corey was working as a cashier at a Home Depot in Park City, and their early relationship was characterized by strong chemistry. However, tension existed from the beginning. Before their backyard wedding, Eric's family concerned with preserving his hard-earned business assets, presented Curry with a prenuptial agreement. The agreement specified that the masonry business belonged solely to Eric, and Curry would only benefit financially from it in the event of his death while they were still married. Though Curry signed the agreement, the document remained a source of long-term friction between her and Eric's protective family. As the years passed, Curry sought to establish her own financial success, launching a real estate development and house-flipping business called K. Richens Realty. By 2021, her business had expanded rapidly, and she was managing 15 renovation projects simultaneously. To the outside world, the family appeared to be living the quintessential American dream. Beautiful children, a luxurious home, and 2 thriving businesses. However, beneath this prosperous facade lay a precarious financial reality. Curry had developed an aggressive, high-risk approach to business, funding her acquisitions through high-interest short-term hard money loans. By early 2022, she had accumulated millions of dollars in debt. Her most ambitious project was the purchase of a partially completed luxury mansion in Midway, Utah, valued at nearly $3 million. She envisioned transforming the property into a high-end event and wedding venue, but the cost of completing the construction was staggering, and her financial resources were entirely depleted. On the night of March 3, 2022, Curry claimed that she and Eric were celebrating a major milestone, the closing of the Midway Mansion deal. According to Curry, she prepared a celebratory Moscow Mule cocktail for Eric, which he consumed in their bedroom before retiring for the night. She claimed that she went to sleep in one of their children's bedrooms to soothe the child, experiencing night terrors, and when she returned to her own bed at approximately 3 a.m, she found Eric cold to the touch and unresponsive. The emergency call Curry placed at 3:26 a.m. summoned first responders to the home. Deputies and paramedics arrived to find Eric on the floor of the bedroom. Despite their efforts, he could not be revived, and he was pronounced deceased at the scene. Paramedics noted a surprising amount of blood foam coming from Eric's airway during chest compressions, leading to an initial speculative theory that he may have suffered a sudden, fatal brain aneurysm. The unexpected death of a healthy, active 39-year-old man necessitated a comprehensive forensic autopsy. The results of the toxicology report were shocking. The chief medical examiner determined that Eric's cause of death was not an aneurysm, but acute oral fentanyl intoxication. The level of fentanyl in his system was 5 times the lethal limit, and crucially, the drug was identified as illicitly manufactured acetylfentanyl, a compound typically associated with street-level narcotics rather than pharmaceutical prescriptions. This toxicological finding immediately transformed a tragic sudden death into a complex homicide investigation. Investigators with the Summit County Sheriff's Office began examining Curry's actions and financial history. They soon discovered that Eric's family had harbored deep suspicions about Corey long before his death. In 2020, Eric had discovered that Corey had secretly taken out a $250,000 line of credit against their family home, which he owned solely, and had spent the funds without his knowledge. This discovery had devastated Eric and shattered his trust in his wife. He consulted with a divorce attorney and privately restructured his estate, creating a family trust that named his sister, Katie, as the executor and trustee, designating his 3 sons as the sole beneficiaries and effectively cutting Corey out of his half of the estate. The tension between the families erupted into physical violence just days after Eric's death, when Corey attempted to hire a locksmith to open Eric's private safe in the garage. His sister, Amy, confronted her, leading to a physical altercation in which Corey assaulted Amy. Corey was subsequently charged and found guilty of simple assault, further solidifying the deep, bitter divide between her and the Richens family. As the criminal investigation deepened, detectives focused on locating the source of the illicit fentanyl. A forensic search of Corey's communication records revealed that she was frequently contacting a woman named Carmen Lauber, who had previously worked as a house cleaner for Corey's real estate projects. Lauber had a history of drug-related offenses. Following a targeted search of Lauber's residence, where investigators discovered drug paraphernalia and, surprisingly, a copy of Eric's obituary taped to a mirror, Lauber agreed to cooperate with law enforcement in exchange for consideration in her own pending legal matters. Lauber revealed that Corey had contacted her in early 2022, requesting strong prescription pain medication for an investor who had suffered a back injury. Lauber procured hydrocodone pills for Corey, but shortly thereafter, Corey requested something much stronger, specifically asking for some of that Michael Jackson stuff, which Lauber understood to mean fentanyl. Lauber admitted that she obtained between 15 and 30 fentanyl pills and delivered them to Corey in mid-February, just before Valentine's Day. This timing aligned perfectly with a highly suspicious incident that Eric had reported to his friends and family. On Valentine's Day, Corey had purchased a bagel sandwich for Eric from a local diner. Shortly after taking a single bite of the sandwich, Eric became violently ill, showing symptoms of a severe allergic reaction. He administered his son's EpiPen, took antihistamines, and slept for several hours. He later texted a close friend, stating that he believed his wife had tried to poison him. This was not the first time Eric had experienced such fears. During a trip to Greece in 2019, he had become violently ill after consuming a drink Corey had given him, prompting him to call his sister in fear for his life. According to Lauber's testimony, Corey contacted her again in late February, stating that the first batch of pills was not strong enough and requesting more. Lauber procured a second batch of fentanyl pills and delivered them to Corey on February 26th. 6 days later, Eric was dead from a massive overdose of the drug. Despite the gathering storm of evidence, Corey continued to project the image of a grieving widow. In an act of extraordinary psychological hubris, she collaborated with a ghostwriter to publish a children's grief book titled Are You With Me? The book, dedicated to her amazing husband, was designed to help children cope with the sudden loss of a parent. Corey embarked on a media tour, appearing on local television and radio programs to promote the book, describing herself as a struggling widow trying to guide her 3 young sons through their grief. The public campaign came to a grinding halt on May 8, 2023, when Corey was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and multiple counts of possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute. Her defense, led by attorney Sky Lozaro and later by public defenders Kathy Nestor and Wendy Lewis, argued that the prosecution's case was entirely circumstantial, emphasizing that there was no direct physical evidence showing how the fentanyl had entered Eric's system. However, the state's case was bolstered by further damning discoveries. During a search of Corey's jail cell, officers uncovered a handwritten 4-page letter addressed to her mother, containing instructions for her brother, Ronnie, to fabricate testimony. The letter, which became known as the Walk the Dog letter, instructed Ronnie to claim that Eric had regularly obtained pain pills and fentanyl from ranch hands in Mexico in an apparent attempt to explain the presence of the drug in his system, while Corey claimed the writing was merely part of a fictional manuscript. Prosecutors successfully argued it was clear evidence of witness tampering and consciousness of guilt. The prosecution also introduced evidence of a romantic motive. Investigators discovered that Corey had been engaging in a long-term, secret affair with a handyman named Josh Grossman. Forensic analysis of their daily text messages revealed that Corey had expressed a deep desire to escape her marriage, texting Grossman shortly before Eric's death that if he could just go away, life would be perfect. Grossman testified during the trial, describing the affair and revealing a chilling conversation they had shared after Eric's death, during which Corey had asked him if he had ever killed anyone during his military service and how it had made him feel. Following a highly publicized trial in which the defense unexpectedly rested, without presenting any witnesses, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. On all counts, Corey Richins was found guilty of aggravated murder, insurance fraud, and witness tampering. The verdict brought a profound sense of justice to the Richins family, though they continued to grieve the loss of Eric, whose 3 sons are now being raised by his sister, surrounded by the love and memory of their devoted father. The third and final narrative carries us to the rural, hard-working railroad community of Willard, Ohio, where a mystery lay cold and unresolved for nearly a quarter of a century. This case centers on the tragic death of Regina Roe Hicks, a young mother whose life was cut short in October of 2001, and the winding path of justice that would eventually connect her murder to an elaborate, highly calculated arson plot 14 years later. Regina Roe Hicks was a vibrant, independent, and protective young woman who grew up in the tight-knit community of Willard. Known for her tomboyish nature, she enjoyed working on four-wheelers, listening to country music, and spending time with her close-knit family. She was deeply devoted to her 4-year-old son, Montana, whom she cherished above all else. Regina was married to Paul Hicks, a railroad foreman for the CSX Transportation Company. Their relationship, which had begun in high school, was characterized by an escalating pattern of control and emotional abuse. Friends and family noted that under Paul's influence, the once loud, happy, and vocal Regina became increasingly silent and withdrawn. A turning point occurred in the summer of 2001 when a sudden fire destroyed the family's home. The fire, officially ruled as electrical in origin, resulted in a $60,000 insurance payout. This financial windfall provided Regina with the resources she needed to reclaim her independence. She filed for divorce, purchased a signature white Camaro, and began rebuilding her life, smiling and laughing once again. However, her bid for freedom faced intense resistance from Paul, who was determined to maintain control and avoid paying child support. The custody battle over Montana grew increasingly bitter, with Paul demanding joint custody to avoid financial obligations. On the evening of Thursday, October 18, 2001, Regina was scheduled to pick up Montana from Paul at the home of his best friend, Stephen Gates. Regina had plans for a night out with her new boyfriend, Mikey Perkins, and had arranged to drop Montana off at her mother's house first. She never arrived to pick up her son. When Regina failed to appear, her family immediately knew that something was deeply wrong, as she would never have abandoned her young child. A search was launched, but it was not until 4 days later, on Monday, October 22nd, that a local farmer spotted something unusual submerged in a farm pond on his property. Divers arrived to find Regina's white Camaro completely submerged in the deep water. Inside the vehicle, on the passenger side, they discovered Regina's body. The positioning of her remains immediately raised significant forensic questions. Her feet were tucked neatly under the passenger side dashboard, and the seat was pushed all the way back, a position inconsistent with the driver of her small stature. The driver's side window was down, and the car was stuck in second gear. The autopsy revealed that Regina had suffered 3 blunt force blows to her scalp, which were sufficient to stun or render her unconscious, but were not fatal. Crucially, the presence of fluid and silt in her airway indicated that she was still alive and breathing when the vehicle was driven into the pond, meaning she had ultimately drowned. The lack of any drugs or alcohol in her system disproved Paul's initial suggestions to police that she had suffered a drug-related misadventure. Despite the highly suspicious circumstances, the case faced a lack of direct physical evidence. No DNA, fingerprints, or fibers linked Paul Hicks to the vehicle. Paul maintained that Regina had never arrived at Stephen Gates's property on the night of her disappearance, a story corroborated by Gates. With no confessions and a lack of forensic breakthroughs, the case eventually went cold, leaving Regina's mother, Losella, to spend the remainder of her life fighting tirelessly for answers she would never receive before her death from cancer. 14 years later, in June of 2015, the quiet town of Goshen, Ohio, a suburb of Cincinnati, was startled by a massive, late-night residential structure fire. First responders arrived to find a ranch-style home completely engulfed in flames, with fire pouring from every door and window. The owner of the home was Paul Hicks, who had purchased the property as an investment. He was working out of town at the time and was staying at a hotel in northern Ohio. When contacted by investigators, Hicks revealed that he had a sophisticated surveillance system installed on the property, and that the recording unit was preserved inside 2 fireproof gun safes. When investigators retrieved and viewed the surveillance footage, they witnessed an extraordinary scene. 2 individuals dressed in white Tyvek suits were captured walking up to the home carrying gas cans. They entered the house, removed a television, poured gasoline throughout the interior, and ignited the blaze, resulting in a dramatic explosion. Crucially, the female suspect in the video had long, curly blonde hair left entirely exposed outside of her suit, and at one point, she stopped and looked directly into the camera. Paul Hicks immediately identified the woman as his ex-girlfriend, Kelly, with whom he was engaged in a highly contentious custody dispute over their young son. He claimed that she had been harassing him, calling his phone over 90 times on the night of the fire, and pointed to a prior incident where she had allegedly vandalized his hot tub. Based on Hicks's detailed statements and the surveillance footage, Kelly was arrested and faced significant legal and social ruin. However, she adamantly maintained her innocence, stating that she had been asleep at her mother's house 30 miles away. The turning point in the arson case came through the meticulous work of Zachary McCune, a civil attorney representing Allstate Insurance. McCune began to notice elements of the case that did not align with a typical arson. The suspects on the video seemed to deliberately display the unique blonde hair, and a detailed analysis of the cell phone records revealed a startling discrepancy. While Paul's phone showed over 90 incoming calls from Kelly's number, Kelly's actual carrier records showed no outgoing calls to his phone during that time frame. Investigators discovered that the calls had been generated using an online application called Spoof Card, which allows a user to disguise their caller ID. By tracing the IP address used to place the spoofed calls, investigators identified a woman who had been engaging in a secret relationship with Paul Hicks. A search of this woman's financial records revealed 2 highly unusual purchases made shortly before the fire: a long, curly blonde wig from a specialty store, and a $368 custom-made latex mask from a website called That's My Face, created using photographs of Kelly's face that had been downloaded from her social media accounts. The evidence revealed an incredibly elaborate, vindictive plot orchestrated by Paul Hicks. He had hired his secret girlfriend and another individual to dress in Tyvek suits, wear a custom mask of his ex-girlfriend's face, and set fire to his own investment property, all in a calculated attempt to secure a major insurance payout and frame Kelly, thereby ensuring he would win full custody of their son. While the civil court ruled against Hicks, ordering him to pay $400,000 to the insurance company, the exposure of his capacity for elaborate, cold-blooded deception caught the attention of cold case investigators at the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Detectives realized that the psychological pattern of control, manipulation, and framing seen in the 2015 arson mirrored the unresolved circumstances of Regina's 2001 murder. They reopened the cold case, focusing their efforts on Stephen Gates, who had served as Paul's alibi for nearly a quarter of a century. In 2024, faced with the persistent efforts of investigators and the public scrutiny generated by a local true crime podcast hosted by Ashley Ford, Gates decided to come forward in exchange for immunity from prosecution. For his prior false statements, Gates revealed the chilling truth of what had occurred on October 18, 2001. Gates admitted that Regina had indeed arrived at his property to pick up Montana, where she was immediately confronted by Paul. The two engaged in a violent argument in the driveway. Gates, wanting to avoid the conflict, retreated into his garage and turned on his tractor to drown out the noise. When he emerged, he discovered Regina's white Camaro parked near the road with the passenger door open. Looking inside, he saw Regina's body slumped in the passenger footwell. Paul Hicks stood over her and coldly informed Gates that she was dead. Gates described how Paul had threatened him, stating that he was now an accessory and must help cover up the crime. Paul drove the Camaro to the remote farm pond, with Gates following in Paul's car. Gates witnessed Paul drive the Camaro into the water, allowing Regina, who is still unconscious but alive, to drown. On the drive back, Paul used his cell phone to call Regina's phone, deliberately creating a false electronic record to suggest he was still trying to reach her. Armed with Gates's detailed confession and corroborating witness statements, including testimony from Paul's sister, who recalled finding his muddy clothes in the bathtub and scratches on his face on the night of the murder, prosecutors arrested Paul Hicks and charged him with murder and kidnapping. In 2025, following a dramatic trial in which the jury deliberated for only 3 hours, Paul Hicks was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Though the journey to justice was exceptionally long, spanning 24 years, the conviction of Paul Hicks brought a profound sense of peace to the Rowe family. It stands as a testament to the enduring power of truth, the patience of dedicated investigators, and the ultimate triumph of justice over even the most calculated acts of human deception. The psychology of deception and the seeking of justice. In the study of criminal psychology, One of the most compelling phenomena is the belief held by certain perpetrators that they can rewrite reality. When an individual decides to commit a crime, particularly one as irreversible as murder or arson, they often attempt to construct an elaborate fictional narrative. They weave a web of lies designed not only to deceive the outside world, but also to comfort their own conscience. They operate under the assumption that if they can control the story, they can escape the consequences of their actions. However, as the annals of modern criminal justice demonstrate, these constructed narratives are almost always undone by the quiet, stubborn persistence of truth, the objectivity of forensic science, and the deep empathy of investigators who refuse to let the victims be forgotten. This exploration looks deeply into 4 distinct cases where individuals tried to write their own endings to tragic real-life plots. In each instance, we see a chilling juxtaposition between a carefully manufactured public persona and a dark, hidden reality. We see how the specialized tools of modern investigation, ranging from deoxyribonucleic acid analysis and digital geofencing to the painstaking reconstruction of deleted cellular records, ultimately dismantled these illusions. More importantly, we honor the memory of the victims and the dedication of the communities and law enforcement professionals who worked tirelessly to bring the truth to light. The storyteller of grief. The human mind possesses an extraordinary capacity for storytelling, especially when attempting to process loss. For children, the concepts of death and absence are particularly difficult to grasp, requiring immense sensitivity and care. In the spring of the year 2023, a self-published children's book titled Are You With Me began to attract local media attention in the state of Utah. The book was presented as a gentle, comforting guide for young minds navigating the painful journey of grief. The author, a young mother of 3 boys named Corey Richens, appeared on local television and radio programs to share her story. To the viewers at home, Corey presented the image of a devoted, grieving widow. She spoke with a soft, steady voice about the tragic, unexpected passing of her 39-year-old husband, Eric Richens, who had died in the middle of the night on the 4th of March in the year 2022. She explained that nights were the hardest for her 3 young sons, who were 10, 9, and 6 years of age. She claimed that she had searched everywhere for a book that could help her children understand that just because their father was no longer physically present, his spirit and love remained with them. Finding nothing that met her needs, she decided to write the book herself, utilizing a ghostwriter to shape her thoughts into a comforting narrative. During her promotional interviews, Corey was met with overwhelming warmth and admiration. Television hosts commended her strength, calling her an amazing and vulnerable woman who was touching the lives of others. The final page of her book featured a poignant drawing of their family of 5, accompanied by a dedication to her sweet baby, promising to love him until they met again. It seemed to be a storybook example of a family finding hope in the wake of a sudden tragedy. However, behind this public facade of maternal devotion and literary healing lay a far more sinister reality. While Corey was presenting herself as a champion of grieving children, the authorities in Summit County, Utah, were quietly putting together a massive puzzle of financial desperation, marital discord, and calculated murder. The true story began in the early morning hours of the 4th of March in the year 2022. A little after 3 in the morning, Corey made a desperate call to 911. She informed the dispatcher that her husband, Eric, was cold to the touch and was not breathing. The dispatcher instructed her to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation, counting out loud to guide her through the compressions. When police officers, firefighters, and paramedics arrived at the suburban home, they found Eric on his back on the bedroom floor. He had no pulse, and his body was indeed cold. The emergency responders utilized a cardiopulmonary resuscitation machine, its rhythmic, mechanical sounds filling the tense bedroom, but it was already too late. Eric Richens was officially pronounced dead at 38 minutes past 3 in the morning. In the initial moments of the police investigation, preserved on body-worn cameras, Corey attempted to establish her narrative. She told the responding deputies that she and Eric had been celebrating a major financial success for her real estate business earlier that evening. She claimed they had shared a mixed drink around 9 in the evening to toast the purchase of a multi-million-dollar property. Afterward, she said, she went to sleep in one of her son's bedrooms because the child was suffering from night terrors. She explained that she frequently slept with her children and would return to her own bed when she woke up in the night. She claimed that when she finally returned to her bedroom, she found Eric unresponsive. When questioned about Eric's physical health, Corey and her mother, Lisa Darden, suggested several potential medical explanations. They mentioned that Eric had suffered from Lyme disease following a hunting trip and that he received weekly allergy shots. They also suggested that he looked pale and unwell the previous evening and had complained of chest pain. They raised the possibility of an aneurysm or a sudden cardiovascular collapse. To the initial responders on the scene, the presence of a small amount of blood near Eric's mouth during chest compressions led to an early, tentative hypothesis of an internal hemorrhage. However, the medical examiner's office was legally obligated to perform an autopsy on a young, active, and seemingly healthy 39-year-old man who had died so suddenly. When the toxicology results returned, the finding was a profound shock to everyone who knew Eric. The cause of death was not a natural medical event. It was acute drug intoxication caused by a massive dose of fentanyl. The report revealed that Eric had ingested more than 5 times the lethal limit of illicit, non-medical grade fentanyl. This was not a pharmaceutical substance prescribed by a physician, but rather a dangerous, synthetic narcotic typically manufactured by illicit drug cartels. Because Eric was known by his friends, family, and community to be an athletic outdoorsman who did not use illicit drugs. The discovery of fentanyl immediately transformed the case from a sudden medical tragedy into a homicide investigation. As detectives began to look into the financial and personal lives of the Richens family, the image of the perfect, affluent household began to crumble. On the surface, the family appeared to be highly successful. Eric owned $1 million stone masonry business, and Corey had established her own real estate and home flipping enterprise. They lived in a beautiful home, took lavish vacations, and seemed to have ample financial resources. In reality, Corey was drowning in a sea of debt. Her ambitions as a real estate developer had far outpaced her financial stability. She had purchased a massive, unfinished mansion in Midway, Utah, for nearly $3 million, hoping to renovate it and sell it for a substantial profit. To fund this project and her other real estate ventures, she had relied heavily on high-interest, short-term, hard money loans. By the time of Eric's death, Corey owed millions of dollars to over 20 different lenders. This financial pressure had begun to affect her marriage years earlier. In the year 2020, Eric discovered that Corey had secretly taken out a $250,000 line of credit against their primary residence, which he solely owned. He was deeply shocked by this deception and realized that his wife's financial practices were putting their family's security at risk. This betrayal prompted Eric to consult with a divorce attorney and to make significant changes to his estate plan. With the guidance of an estate planner, Eric established a secret trust and will. He designated his sister, Katie, as the executor and trustee, and named his 3 sons as the sole beneficiaries of the trust. He placed the family home into the trust, ensuring that Corey would not have direct control over the property or his masonry business. Crucially, the prenuptial agreement they had signed prior to their wedding dictated that Corey would only benefit from his business if they were married at the time of his death. The tension between the two families erupted almost immediately after Eric's passing. The morning after a gathering of friends at the home to honor Eric's life, Corey attempted to access Eric's will, which she believed was kept in a home safe. She hired a locksmith to drill open the safe, a move that was discovered by Eric's other sister, Amy. A heated physical altercation ensued, during which Amy informed Corey that she had been largely cut out of the estate and that the home did not belong to her. Corey was subsequently arrested and charged with assault, to which she later entered a plea of no contest. As the criminal investigation deepened, detectives focused on locating the source of the lethal fentanyl. A search of Corey's cellular phone and electronic devices revealed that she was in frequent communication with a woman named Carmen Lauber, who had worked as a house cleaner for Corey's business and possessed a prior criminal record involving illicit substances. With the assistance of a newly assigned lead investigator, Detective Jeff O'Driscoll, the authorities executed a search warrant at Carmen's residence. There, they discovered drug paraphernalia, a firearm, and a chilling piece of evidence taped to a mirror, a copy of Eric Richen's obituary. Facing the prospect of significant prison time, Carmen agreed to cooperate with the prosecution. Carmen revealed to investigators that Corey had approached her on 2 separate occasions to procure strong pain medication, specifically requesting fentanyl. According to Carmen, Corey's first purchase had occurred in February, shortly before Valentine's Day dinner. Corey later complained that the first batch of pills was not strong enough, prompting her to request a second, more powerful dose, which Carmen delivered to her on the 26th of February, just days before Eric's death. This timeline of drug purchases aligned perfectly with a series of suspicious health crises that Eric had experienced. The authorities learned that during a trip to Greece in the year 2019, Eric had become violently ill after drinking a beverage prepared by Corey. More recently, on Valentine's Day, in the year 2022, Corey had purchased a bagel sandwich from a local diner and left it for Eric with a loving note. After taking a single bite, Eric suffered a severe physical reaction, requiring the use of his son's epinephrine auto-injector and a large dose of Benadryl. He later texted a friend, expressing his belief that his wife had attempted to poison him. In May of the year 2023, Corey Richens was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and possession of illicit substances with the intent to distribute. The arrest of the prominent children's book author became a sensation, drawing national attention to the quiet Utah community. During a pre-trial bail hearing in June of the year 2023, prosecutors presented a wealth of evidence to argue that Corey should remain in custody. They introduced a forensic accountant's analysis of her desperate financial situation, as well as a series of highly incriminating internet searches recovered from her cellular phone. Following the execution of a search warrant at her home, Corey had searched for luxury prisons for the rich in America, whether law enforcement could recover deleted text messages from an iPhone, how poisonings are categorized on death certificates, and what constitutes a lethal dose of fentanyl. While in jail awaiting trial, Corey's penchant for writing once again became her undoing. During a routine search of her cell, deputies discovered a 4-page handwritten letter, often referred to as the Walk the Dog letter. The document contained detailed instructions for Corey's mother, directing her to instruct Corey's brother, Ronnie, to testify falsely. She wanted him to claim that Eric had told him that he obtained pain pills and fentanyl from ranch workers in Mexico. The prosecution argued that this letter was clear evidence of witness tampering, while the defense claimed it was merely a draft of a fictional manuscript. The case grew even more complex when prosecutors uncovered a second powerful motive: a romantic affair. Investigators discovered that Corey had been engaged in a long-term, highly emotional affair with a handyman named Josh Grossman. The two had exchanged thousands of intimate text messages in which Corey expressed her deep love for him and her desire to build a future together. In the weeks Leading up to Eric's death, she texted Josh about a dream of divorcing her husband, obtaining millions of dollars from his estate, and purchasing the Midway mansion to live together in the guest house. Less than 48 hours before Eric was found dead, she sent a text to Josh, pleading with him to hang in there until Friday, promising that life would be different. When the trial finally commenced, the prosecution built a methodical case over 13 days, presenting the testimony of forensic experts, family members, and Corey's former friends. Carmen Lauber took the stand, emotionally recounting her role in procuring the fatal drugs and expressing her desire to take responsibility for her actions. Perhaps the most dramatic moment of the trial occurred when Josh Grossman was called to testify. The former lover appeared visibly uncomfortable and emotional as his private, romantic text messages were projected onto the screen in the quiet courtroom. He recounted a chilling conversation he shared with Corey shortly after Eric's death, during which she asked him if he had ever killed anyone during his military service in Iraq and how it had made him feel. In a move that stunned the courtroom, the defense team, led by public defenders Kathy Nestor and Wendy Lewis, chose to rest their case without calling a single witness. They argued that the prosecution had failed to meet its burden of proof, emphasizing that there was no direct forensic evidence showing how the fentanyl had actually been introduced into Eric's system. After deliberating for just under 3 hours, the 8-member jury returned with a unanimous verdict. Corey Richins was found guilty of aggravated murder and all remaining charges. The storybook facade had completely shattered. The young woman who had written a book to help children cope with the loss of their father was revealed to be the very person who had taken his life. In accordance with Utah law, her parental rights were terminated, and her 3 young sons were adopted by one of Eric's sisters, where they are raised in a stable, loving environment. Corey Richins faces a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her elaborate narratives of grief and innocence finally silenced by the pursuit of justice. The silent firefighter. The city of Evansville, Indiana, is a tight-knit community where first responders are held in high esteem. In this environment, a veteran firefighter of 28 years named Robert Dorr, known to everyone as Robbie, was a beloved figure. He was a natural leader dedicated to training rookie firefighters and protecting the citizens of his hometown. His commitment to service was a family tradition passed down from his father, who had also served as a firefighter. On a cold night in February of the year 2019, the peacefulness of the Evansville community was shattered by a sudden act of violence. Robbie had just arrived at his home on Oakley Street after working a grueling 12-hour shift at the fire department. His wife, Elizabeth Fox Dorr, who went by the name Becky, was inside the house, preparing a dinner of pork chops and macaroni and cheese. According to Elizabeth, she saw the headlights of Robbie's truck pull into the driveway. Within a minute, the quiet night was punctuated by the sound of 4 or 5 loud pops. Elizabeth called 911, her voice filled with panic as she reported that her husband was lying on the ground, bleeding from a gunshot wound to the head. Emergency responders rushed to the scene. The first arriving officers and paramedics found Robbie lying on the concrete driveway, still possessing a weak pulse. They immediately began chest compressions and administrative medical care, but their efforts were in vain. Robbie Dorr was pronounced dead on his own driveway, having been shot multiple times. The news of Robbie's death spread quickly through the Evansville Fire Department, bringing many of his fellow firefighters to the scene. The chaotic atmosphere was heavy with grief and disbelief as they watched their fallen brother being escorted by a procession of fire trucks to the county coroner's office. Detectives from the Evansville Police Department immediately began a comprehensive investigation, establishing a war room and canvass-searching the neighborhood for witnesses. Several neighbors reported hearing 5 distinct gunshots, but no one had seen the assailant or a suspicious vehicle. A search of the physical crime scene yielded no shell casings, which was an unusual and critical detail. The next day, during the autopsy, a forensic pathologist recovered several projectiles from Robbie's body. The ballistics analysis revealed a highly unique and disturbing detail. The projectiles recovered were a mixture of different types of ammunition, including jacketed bullets, lead ball projectiles, and plastic shotgun wadding. A firearms expert identified that this specific combination of ammunition was characteristic of a Taurus Judge, a specialized revolver designed to fire both traditional handgun cartridges and shotgun shells from the same cylinder. The weapon was often referred to as a hand cannon, and its distinct signature became the focal point of the investigation. As detectives began to look into the personal lives of the Dorr family, they uncovered a complex and troubled dynamic. Robbie and Elizabeth had been married for only 6 months, following a very brief relationship. Prior to marrying Robbie, Elizabeth had been married 5 times, a history that suggested a persistent difficulty in establishing a stable family life. Her son, Nathan, described her as someone who desperately wanted a picture-perfect life, but struggled to find consistency. In the weeks leading up to his murder, Robbie had begun to express deep insecurities and trust issues within the marriage. Investigators recovered a handwritten note from Robbie to Elizabeth in which he expressed concern about potential infidelity, noting that she frequently deleted her text messages and kept her cellular phone hidden from him. Additionally, the marriage was under significant financial strain. Despite Robbie working multiple jobs, including a managerial position at a local restaurant, Elizabeth was not working, and they had accumulated substantial debt from recent purchases, including a new vehicle, furniture, and a wedding ring. Detectives also turned their attention to Elizabeth's sister, Amanda Fillmore, who went by Mandy. Mandy lived nearby and was engaged in a romantic relationship with a man named Larry Richmond Sr. When investigators ran a criminal background check on Larry Sr., they discovered a chilling fact. He was currently on probation after serving 20 years in prison for a prior murder conviction. Despite his violent past, Mandy was deeply in love with Larry Sr., describing him as a gentle protector and introducing him to her family, including Elizabeth and Robbie, without disclosing his criminal history. Larry Sr.'s son, Larry Richmond Jr., worked at a local pawn shop called River City Pawn. Through cooperation with federal authorities, investigators learned that a Taurus Judge revolver had been reported stolen from that very pawn shop shortly before the murder. When questioning Larry Jr., detectives confronted him with a photograph recovered from his social media, which showed him with the stolen Taurus Judge in his lap. Larry Jr. eventually admitted to stealing the firearm and providing it to his father, Larry Sr. On the day of Robbie's funeral, a massive and emotional event attended by firefighters from across the region, detectives made the decision to bring in all of the key individuals for simultaneous questioning. They detained Larry Sr., Mandy, Larry Jr., and Elizabeth in separate interview rooms at the police headquarters. During her interrogation, Elizabeth maintained her initial story, claiming that she had been inside cooking dinner when she heard the gunshots. However, detectives had obtained her cellular phone records directly from the service provider. The digital data revealed a critical piece of evidence that Elizabeth had attempted to erase: a 4-minute and 18-second phone call with Larry Richmond Sr., which occurred just 5 minutes before she made the 911 call. When confronted with this discrepancy, Elizabeth became evasive. She admitted to deleting the call record, claiming it was a habitual practice to keep her phone clean, and that she hid the call because she did not want investigators to suspect she was having an affair with her sister's fiancé. However, she denied any involvement in her husband's murder. Meanwhile, Larry Richmond Jr. provided investigators with a crucial lead. He revealed that his father kept a large collection of weapons, which he had buried in a plastic tote in the backyard of Mandy's residence. Surveillance footage from a neighboring home captured Larry Sr. carrying a heavy box behind the garage with a digging tool and returning empty-handed. Officers executed a search warrant at Mandy's home and excavated the backyard, recovering several hidden firearms, although the specific Taurus Judge used in the murder was not among them. The investigation also uncovered evidence of a romantic relationship between Elizabeth and Larry Sr. Larry Jr. testified that he had witnessed his father and Elizabeth sharing an intimate kiss behind Robbie's home. Furthermore, after Robbie's death, Elizabeth had visited the firehouse to inquire about his pension and life insurance policies, raising significant red flags for investigators. Despite these suspicious details, the case faced a temporary setback when the initial charges of obstruction of justice against Elizabeth were dropped. She was released from custody and quickly began relationships with other men, further alienating her children, who believed she was involved in their stepfather's death. Her son, Nathan, confronted her directly, accusing her of murdering Robbie for his financial benefits. The breakthrough in the case occurred when high-tech crime investigators successfully bypassed the security passcode on Larry Sr.'s iPhone, a process that had taken several months. The recovered location data placed Larry Sr.'s phone in the immediate vicinity of Robbie's home on the night of the murder, tracking his movements as he moved through the alleyways behind the property. The digital timeline revealed that Larry Sr. had been waiting in the dark. When Robbie arrived home, Elizabeth had spoken to Larry Sr. on the phone, informing him that Robbie was on his way, and then immediately deleted the call. Larry Sr. then powered off his phone, ambushed Robbie as he exited his truck, and shot him multiple times. In November of the year 2019, Elizabeth Fox Dorr and Larry Richmond Sr. were officially charged with murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Elizabeth was tried first. During the trial, the prosecution presented a powerful case of circumstantial evidence, focusing on the deleted phone call, the ballistics, and her financial motivations. Her own son, Nathan, testified against her, recounting how she had repeatedly asked about Robbie's pension on the very night of his death. After a tense trial, the jury deliberated for more than 4 hours before returning with a guilty verdict on all counts. Elizabeth was sentenced to 90 years in prison, ensuring she would spend the rest of her life behind bars. Larry Richmond Sr. was subsequently tried, with Mandy testifying honestly that she could not account for his whereabouts on the night of the murder. The jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The tragic conspiracy had been dismantled. Robbie Dorr was honored by his fellow firefighters, who dedicated their newest fire truck in his memory, ensuring that his legacy of service would continue to protect the city he loved. The Mask of the Arsonist. In the quiet suburb of Goshen, Ohio, located on the eastern edge of the Cincinnati metropolitan area, a destructive fire broke out in the early morning hours of June in the year 2015. Emergency dispatchers received a call at 35 minutes past 1 in the morning, reporting that a home on Goshen Road was engulfed in flames. Firefighters responded urgently, arriving to find thick black smoke and intense fire pouring from every window and door of the residence. The crews immediately deployed hose lines and entered the burning structure, searching for any potential victims who might be trapped inside. Fortunately, the house was unoccupied at the time, but the interior search yielded a highly suspicious discovery. As the firefighters crawled through the thick smoke, they encountered 2 large 5-gallon plastic gasoline cans positioned in the living room and a bedroom. Recognizing the clear signs of arson, the fire chief requested the assistance of local and state fire investigators, alongside the Claremont County Sheriff's Office. The owner of the home was a railroad foreman named Paul Hicks. He had purchased the property 6 months earlier as an investment, intending to renovate it. When contacted by investigators, Paul was staying at a hotel in Bluffton, Ohio, where he was working on a railway crossing project. He informed detectives that he had installed a high-definition infrared surveillance camera system at the home, which was secured inside a fireproof gun safe. Investigators recovered the digital video recorder and successfully retrieved the footage, which provided an extraordinary and clear record of the crime. The surveillance video captured two individuals wearing white protective Tyvek suits approaching the home at approximately 15 minutes past 1 in the morning. One of the individuals, whom investigators believed to be a female, had long, curly blonde hair hanging down her shoulders, completely exposed to the camera. The second individual, a male, poured gasoline throughout the interior of the house, which erupted into a massive, explosive fireball. Upon viewing the footage, Paul Hicks immediately and confidently identified the female arsonist as his ex-girlfriend, Kelly. He claimed that they had been engaged in a highly volatile custody battle over their young son, and that Kelly had called his phone over 100 times the night before the fire, threatening to destroy his life. He also showed investigators a separate piece of surveillance footage from a previous incident, which showed a woman with similar blonde hair vandalizing his hot tub. Based on Paul's identification and the outstanding warrant from the hot tub incident, deputies arrested Kelly during a custody exchange at a local grocery store. Handcuffed and in shock, Kelly adamantly denied any involvement in the arson, claiming she had been asleep at her mother's home, 30 minutes away, on the night of the fire. The investigation took a dramatic turn when detectives analyzed the cell phone records of both parties. While Paul's phone showed over 90 incoming calls from Kelly's number, Kelly's actual phone records from her service provider revealed that she had made only 5 calls to him that evening, none of which occurred during the hours of the fire. This massive discrepancy suggested that someone had manipulated the cellular network to frame Kelly. The breakthrough came through the efforts of Zach McCune, a specialized attorney representing the insurance company, Allstate, which had denied Paul's claim for the fire. McCune began to investigate the possibility of phone spoofing, a technology that allows an individual to disguise their caller ID to appear as another number. A subpoena to a service called Spoof Card revealed that the wave of harassing calls had actually originated from an internet protocol address registered to a woman who had recently been in a romantic relationship with Paul Hicks. The woman testified that she had purchased a cellular phone at Paul's request, which he used to make the spoof calls. Further financial investigations uncovered a series of highly unusual purchases made under this woman's name. Detectives discovered a transaction at a local shop called Kay's Wigs for a synthetic wig that perfectly matched Kelly's curly blonde hair. Even more stunning, they found a $368 purchase from an online company called That's My Face. This service allowed customers to upload photographs of an individual and receive a 3-dimensional, custom-made plastic mask of their face. A subpoena to the company confirmed that the order had been placed using photographs of Kelly's face, which had been retrieved from Paul Hicks' social media accounts. the pieces of the elaborate conspiracy fell into place. Paul Hicks had hired accomplices to dress in Tyvek suits, wearing a custom mask of Kelly's face and a blonde wig, and to deliberately look directly at the surveillance cameras while setting the fire. He had then spoofed her phone number to create a false digital trail of harassment, all in an effort to secure a large insurance payout and destroy Kelly's credibility in their custody battle. While Allstate successfully countersued Paul Hicks for fraud, securing a $400,000 judgment against him, criminal investigators from the Huron County Sheriff's Office were looking into Paul for a far darker matter. They revealed that in the year 2001, Paul's first wife, Regina Rowe Hicks, had been the victim of an unsolved homicide in the rural town of Willard, Ohio. Regina was a vibrant, independent young woman who loved working on four-wheelers and listening to country music. In the summer of the year 2001, a mysterious fire had destroyed the home she shared with Paul. After receiving a $60,000 insurance settlement, Regina had filed for divorce, purchased a signature white Camaro, and begun a new relationship, finding her long-lost independence. On a crisp October evening in the year 2001, Regina was scheduled to pick up her 4-year-old son, Montana, from Paul Hicks at the home of his best friend, Steve Gates. She never arrived, and her family launched a frantic search. 4 days later, a local farmer discovered a white Camaro submerged in a deep farm pond. Inside the vehicle, authorities recovered Regina's body from the passenger side floorboard. An autopsy revealed that she had suffered 3 blunt force blows to her scalp, which had incapacitated her, and that she had died from drowning, indicating she was alive when the car entered the water. The physical evidence from the car suggested that a much larger person had been driving, as the driver's seat was pushed all the way back, and a distinct mud swipe from Regina's boot was found on the passenger door, proving she had been placed there. Despite strong suspicions pointing toward Paul, the investigation went cold due to a lack of direct forensic evidence. Over 20 years later, a local podcaster named Ashley Ford began to look into Regina's cold case, bringing renewed public attention to the mystery. The increased scrutiny prompted state investigators from the Bureau of Criminal Investigation to re-interview witnesses, focusing on Paul's best friend, Steve Gates. Confronted by investigators and facing pressure, Steve Gates agreed to cooperate. In exchange for immunity from prosecution, he revealed the truth of what had happened on that night in October of the year 2001. Steve testified that Regina had arrived at his property to pick up her son and had entered into a violent argument with Paul Hicks over child support and custody. Steve had retreated to his garage to avoid the conflict. When he emerged, he saw Regina unresponsive in the passenger seat of her Camaro. Paul told him she was dead and that Steve was now involved. Out of fear for his own safety, Steve followed Paul as he drove the Camaro into the farm pond, leaving Regina to drown. He had kept this dark secret for 20 for years. In April of the year 2025, Paul Hicks was arrested and indicted for the murder and kidnapping of Regina Roe Hicks. He pleaded not guilty, and the case proceeded to trial. The prosecution presented a powerful narrative of Paul's history of domestic abuse, control, and his pattern of utilizing arson for financial and personal gain. After a short deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. Paul Hicks was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years, bringing a definitive end to his decades of deception. Kelly was cleared of all charges, reunited with her son, Daniel, and the Roe family. Finally found the justice and peace they had sought for a quarter of a century. The signal in the Pass of the Oaks. The central coast of California is home to the scenic community of Paso Robles, a region renowned for its rolling hills, ancient oak trees, and world-class vineyards. In this peaceful and affluent landscape, 62-year-old Nancy Woodrum was a beloved figure. She was a skilled hairstylist who operated a popular salon called The Strand, and she was a devout Jehovah's Witness who dedicated much of her time to her faith and her community. Nancy lived alone at Paradise Ranch, a secluded and beautiful property on El Faro Road that she and her late husband had spent years remodeling. In May of the year 2018, Nancy decided to sell the ranch to focus entirely on her ministry, and she had hired several contractors to perform final repairs on the home. On Friday, the 4th of May, a large group of wedding guests checked into the main house at Paradise Ranch, preparing for a weekend celebration at a local winery. The bride, who was staying in the adjacent guest cottage, met Nancy, who welcomed her with a warm embrace. The next afternoon, Nancy's daughter, Amanda, grew concerned when her mother failed to appear for a scheduled Bible study. Amanda's neighbor went to check on Nancy and found the front door of her cottage wide open, with the television blaring, but Nancy was nowhere to be found. When Amanda arrived, she discovered her mother's purse, keys, cellular phone, and vehicles were all present at the home. However, she noticed a large stain on the carpet, and her mother's bedding was entirely missing. Looking closer, she saw blood spatter on the walls and the headboard, prompting her to make a frantic call to 911. Senior Deputy Clinton Cole, a veteran investigator with the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office, arrived at the scene and immediately recognized that a violent crime had taken place. The evidence suggested that Nancy had been assaulted inside her bedroom and taken from the property against her will. The investigation received a significant lead when an officer from the California Highway Patrol discovered several discarded items on the side of La Ponza Road, approximately 7 miles from the ranch. The items included blood, stained bedding that matched the pattern of Nancy's sheets, a woman's dress, and clothing that Amanda confirmed belonged to her mother. With over 20 wedding guests staying on the property, detectives faced a daunting task. They secured the entire ranch as an active crime scene, interviewing every guest and collecting deoxyribonucleic acid samples. While one guest initially appeared suspicious because of his movements during the rehearsal dinner, he was quickly cleared after his wife provided photographic proof of his presence at the event. Investigators then turned their attention to the contractors who had worked on the ranch. They focused on a general contractor named Sean Bloom, who had recently engaged in a heated financial dispute with Nancy after being fired from the job. However, Bloom cooperated fully, providing a voluntary deoxyribonucleic acid sample that did not match the unknown male profile recovered from a bloody handprint on a pillow in Nancy's bedroom. With the investigation stalling and the local community growing increasingly anxious, the sheriff's office decided to utilize a cutting-edge investigative tool, Google geofencing. This technology allowed investigators to establish a virtual boundary around Paradise Ranch and request anonymized data from Google regarding any cellular devices that were active within that boundary during the hours of Nancy's disappearance. The search warrant yielded a crucial result. At 33 minutes past 1 a.m. the morning, on the night Nancy vanished, a single device was active inside her cottage. This was the exact time that an interrupted 911 call had been attempted from Nancy's phone. A subsequent warrant for the subscriber information revealed that the device belonged to a painter named Carlo Fuentes Flores, who had recently worked on Nancy's decks. Carlo had no prior criminal record, and his employer described him as a polite, mild-mannered father and husband who was exceptionally skilled at his trade. However, a deep forensic analysis of Carlo's Google search history revealed a hidden, dark persona. In the weeks leading up to the crime, he had searched extensively for explicit videos featuring older women and had made inquiries regarding escorts in various cities. He had also recorded numerous intimate encounters with different women on his phone. Detectives placed Carlo under surveillance and successfully recovered a discarded soda bottle from a local restaurant. The state crime lab extracted his deoxyribonucleic acid from the bottle and confirmed a perfect match to the bloody handprint on the pillow. Investigators brought Carlo in for interrogation, initially presenting him with photographs of the property and asking benign questions about his painting work. When they confronted him with the scientific certainty of the deoxyribonucleic acid match, Carlo's confident demeanor collapsed. He broke down, admitting that he had killed Nancy, but claiming it was a tragic accident where he had accidentally run her over with his truck while retrieving a ladder in the dark. Detectives pushed past this initial lie, pointing out that an accidental collision would not explain the blood spatter and the handprint inside the bedroom. Carlo finally confessed to the full horror of his actions. He admitted that he had entered her home with the intent to assault her, had beaten her to incapacitate her, and had subsequently raped her. Afterward, to ensure she could not identify him to the police, he had suffocated her with a pillow. In a stunning moment, Carlo offered to lead investigators to where he had hidden Nancy's remains. He guided Senior Deputy Cole and a team of detectives to a remote, desolate area of the Carrizo Plain, nearly an hour's drive from Paso Robles. There, hidden beneath a small, unnatural pile of rocks, investigators recovered Nancy's skeletal remains, which had been scattered by local wildlife. The discovery brought a profound sense of grief and closure to her family, who had spent months praying for her return. Faced with the overwhelming evidence of his confession, his internet history, and the recorded jail calls in which he admitted his crimes to his wife, Carlo, Fuentes Flores chose to enter a slow plea. This legal procedure allowed the prosecution to present their evidence to a judge, who subsequently found him guilty of first-degree murder with the special circumstance of rape during a burglary. In January of the year 2022, Carlo Fuentes Flores was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would never again walk free. At her memorial, held at a beautiful vineyard, hundreds of community members gathered to celebrate Nancy's life, remembering her as a strong, loving woman of deep faith. Her daughter, Amanda, continues to ride Nancy's beloved horse, Montana, passing on her mother's passion for nature and life to her own daughter, ensuring that Nancy's bright light is never truly extinguished. The triumph of truth. These 4 cases, spanning different states and decades, reveal a profound truth about human nature and the pursuit of justice, whether it is a mother crafting a children's book to mask a calculated poisoning, a wife conspiring with a convicted felon to execute her firefighter husband, an arsonist utilizing custom masks to frame his ex-girlfriend for his own crimes, or a mild-mannered painter hiding a dark, violent obsession behind a polite facade. The truth possesses an inevitable, stubborn persistence. The modern criminal justice system, equipped with advanced technologies like geofencing, precise chemical and toxicological testing, and high-tech digital forensic extraction, is capable of dismantling even the most complex webs of deception. Yet, these scientific achievements are only effective when guided by the empathy, patience, and tireless dedication of the investigators, family members, and communities who refuse to allow the victims' voices to be silenced. In the end, these stories demonstrate that the narratives of lies and self-interest constructed by perpetrators are fragile and temporary. The lasting, permanent stories are those of the victims themselves, whose memories are honored, whose families are supported, and whose lives are remembered not for the tragedies that took them, but for the love, light, and goodness they brought into the world. The architecture of human deception is a labyrinth where the criminal mind seeks shelter behind carefully constructed facades. To understand these dark corridors, a criminal psychology analyst must look past the superficial presentations of normalcy, grief, or victimization, and examine the subtle, often microscopic fissures left by guilt. Throughout history, the resolution of seemingly impenetrable mysteries has depended not only on technological advances, but also on the methodical, patient application of behavioral analysis and structural empathy by examining the actions of those who believe they have executed the perfect crime. Investigators reveal a universal truth: no matter how meticulously a plan is devised, the human element, fractured by narcissism, greed, or the desire for control, ultimately betrays the perpetrator. The following narratives represent a profound testament to the investigative forces that labor in the shadows to restore balance, honor the memory of the lost, and ensure that truth prevails over deception. Let us begin our psychological inquiry with a journey into the picturesque vineyards and rolling hills of Paso Robles, California. Nestled halfway between San Francisco and Los Angeles, this getaway town is renowned for its scenic beauty, its oak trees, and its quiet, fairy tale atmosphere. Known historically as El Paso de Robles, or the Pass of the Oaks, it is a community where neighbors trust one another, and the layout of the land offers a sense of pastoral peace. Yet down El Faro Road, in the middle of this natural beauty and tragedy took place that would challenge the collective security of this close-knit community. The central figure of this community was Nancy Woodrum, a 62-year-old woman who ran a popular salon downtown called The Strand. Nancy was a fixture in the area, a warm, generous, and devout individual who lived alone on a secluded vacation property named Paradise Ranch. Following the passing of her husband, A. few years prior, she poured her energy into her family, her horseback riding, and her faith as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Those who knew her, including her daughter Amanda, spoke of a unique bond defined by openness, kindness, and a shared passion for the outdoors. Nancy had decided to sell Paradise Ranch to devote her time fully to preaching and teaching her faith, and she was in the process of having final renovations completed on the property. On Friday, May 4th, 2018, a large group of wedding guests checked into the spacious Victorian-style main house at Paradise Ranch. The property was an ideal venue for a weekend wedding at a local winery with its wraparound porches and large willow trees. The bride-to-be, staying in the adjacent guest house, met Nancy that afternoon, noting her warm hospitality. However, the serene weekend was abruptly shattered the following day. On Saturday, May 5th, 2018, Amanda received a concerning telephone call informing her that her mother had failed to appear for a scheduled Bible study. This was highly uncharacteristic of Nancy, whose devotion to her routine and community was absolute. Amanda immediately requested that a neighbor visit the cottage to check on her mother. The neighbor arrived to find the front door wide open, the television blaring, and no sign of Nancy. When Amanda and her family approached the cottage, they confronted a deeply unsettling scene. Nancy's purse, car keys, cellular phone, and tablet were still inside, and her two vehicles remained parked outside. Yet, a closer examination revealed a large stain on the carpet, and Nancy's sheets and bedding were entirely missing. spotting what appeared to be blood spatter on the walls. Amanda contacted emergency services. The subsequent call to the 911 dispatch recorded a frantic family attempting to make sense of a sudden, quiet disappearance amidst a bustling wedding party of over 20 guests.